watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, and welcome to The Establishing Shot, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. I am your host, Eli Price, and we are here on episode 103 of the podcast, rolling along in our Spielberg series. I'm excited to jump into this. We've got some real mini series here on like historical movies with War Horse, Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, a little break with BFG, and then The Post. I mean, another kind of like very political, history interested movie. We're going to be talking about Lincoln today. So, the man himself, the man, the myth, the silhouette, you might say. I've got a returning guest, a favorite, you might say. He is definitely not more lizard than man. He is Jean-Pierre Boudreaux, and aka JP. You know, you can't, if you don't know him that well, you're not allowed to call him JP, just Mr. Boudreaux only.
Please, Mr. Boudreaux is my fault.
Yeah.
I was telling you before we recorded, I read that in your outline, and I was like, I have no idea why he's saying that. And then now I've actually seen the film, and I have context for that, as you said, one of the best lines of the movie that I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. Yeah, JP is not more lizard than man, unlike George Pendleton, I think is
Wood. I think it's Mr. Wood. No, it wasn't Wood.
I think it is George Pendleton. Yeah, George. He says George.
All these.
I'm just trying to remember his last name.
There's
Pendleton,
so many
I think.
names.
Yeah, the cast list. Putting the cast list into my Google Doc for this was quite the task. Luckily, Wikipedia came through for me though. It was, man. Whoever did that Wikipedia page and organized it by like...
It is very impressively organized by the different associations. I did see that.
Yeah. But JP, he's been on a bunch of times before. You're probably my most decorated guest. The thing with you, Eli, is... you say, do you want to talk about this movie? And I come running, you're basically like honorary co-host at this point.
Hey, if you want to make me permanent co-host, I wouldn't be opposed. We'll figure it out. But I feel like I need a jacket, like the Five Timers Club from SNL.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
I don't even know how many times it's been now, but always a pleasure being here with you, man.
Yeah, definitely. JP's always up to something. Filming, and I know you've been working on some documentary projects and stuff like that. Do you want to share anything you have that you're working on, or that you've finished, or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm just always looking for new projects to kind of expand my portfolio, my repertoire. Just always looking for new ways to kind of express myself creatively. I'm really excited. I've got a project I shot with some missionaries in Chile. I'll be wrapping up soon. It was really kind of a dream come true being able to do a documentary in the missions field, and learned a lot. Learned so much, and I'll probably once everything's done, I plan on doing a YouTube video just about the lessons I've learned, because I wish someone would have done that for me and given me more insight into like the challenges you actually face. But
sure.
And then I got some other stuff I'm working on locally with like a local MMA fighter and some other things, and I'm always looking for some other more opportunities to tell stories. I love doing it. Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw like a little snippet of the MMA fighter one that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you release like a little snippet of it or something?
Yeah. I did a little edit of the first kind of like sparring session I filmed with
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
And then I filmed like some workout stuff with him, and his first professional debut fight was supposed to be last month, but it got postponed. But it's
Gotcha.
actually this coming weekend, Saturday.
Gotcha.
So I'm sure he's excited. I need to text him this week actually and see if we need to work on some stuff. But excited to kind of maybe capture some of that and kind of see where the story continues to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. Fun. Those are, I mean, they sound like fun projects. Also, like, yeah, good challenges probably too, huh?
Yeah, well, and then also, I got to shoot something. Leaving Chile, I visited Guatemala for a few days to see my girlfriend for her birthday, be with her and her family, and we got to shoot something together there. For a friend of hers, just kind of capturing the life story of his grandpa, and it was a lot of fun, man, and it's kind of really inspiring me to kind of pursue these kind of like time capsule projects, if you will. And just give people an opportunity to have this kind of living, breathing memorial for aging family members that, sometimes they're there one day and then they're not there the next day. And I was very blessed to be able to do something kind of for my grandpa a few years ago and get the story of like how he and my grandmother met, and then he ended up passing away later that same year.
Yeah.
And so I got another one of those kind of in the works with a friend of mine, possibly. But it's something I'm kind of interested in maybe exploring more, is kind of working specifically with capturing the story of like elderly people.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I guess the Spielberg parallel would be like his Showa Foundation, where they captured archive. Like, I mean, it's different because they're archiving, people that have been through the Holocaust. But yeah, just like, putting together an archive of like similar kinds of stories, but that are, expressed in different ways and different perspectives. That sounds really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I guess before we jump into Lincoln Talk, is there anything else you've been watching recently that you want to share?
Yeah, man, a lot of things. With my girlfriend and I being long distance, we do a movie pretty much every week. At least if there's nothing else we can do during the week, we have a dedicated movie night every week. So we watch all kinds of stuff, new stuff, old stuff. But as far as what I've been watching recently, man, I just saw 28 Years Later on Thursday night. So release night. Firstly, the theater was actually pretty full, which I know you probably feel the same way. Like, anytime I go to see a movie that's not like a big blockbuster movie, like an MCU film, and the theater is packed, it like makes me happy. It really does.
Same.
Like, it makes me happy to see people out there. Like I remember when I went and saw The Menu, like, was it 2-3 years ago now?
Sure.
I was like, dude, the theater was packed when I went to go see that movie, and it's just so nice watching it with a theater full of people, and everyone's laughing at the same parts or jumping at the same parts and things like that. So,
do people show up for the horror flicks?
Yeah, it's true. That's true, and it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of I've been watching some kind of video essays about it on the back end, and realizing that I guess I never realized how big the legacy of 28 Days Later is. But in a lot of ways, it kind of revitalized the zombie genre. Like, and especially especially like, man, without 28 Days Later, there's no The Last of Us, there's no World War Z. There's a lot of other projects that came out afterwards. That
Walking Dead, probably.
The Walking Dead, literally, The Walking Dead's like first episode is almost a shot for shot, so to speak, of the opening of 28 Days Later, where Rick wakes up in the hospital a month after the outbreak from a coma, no memory.
That's true. I forgot about that.
I think it's a very obvious homage, right? But I will say this, like, I love 28 Days Later. You know, even if the cinematography is kind of really it's gross looking, to be honest, like because of how they shot it. And I've seen 28 Weeks Later maybe once or twice, and I don't hate it. I think it's fine. But I gotta say, 28 Years Later, I was expecting it to be good, but oh my dude, it was amazing.
I'm excited. I haven't seen
loved
it yet.
I know it's I mean it's got a really high critical score. But
Sure.
I will say this. I know it's gonna be a movie that you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it.
Hmm.
I've already seen some like I was watching a review earlier from some random YouTube channel that popped up on my suggestion page,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy was ripping the movie apart. But I'm like, I think he just kind of missed the point. I loved it. I thought it was a great time. Highly recommend that. And also, I think maybe more on the TV side of things, man, if anyone listening to this, if you have not watched Severance, I'm telling you right now, Apple TV is like $10 a month. Severance alone is worth the cost.
Mm.
Just buy a month of Apple TV, watch season 1, watch season 2. It is the best show that there is right now, hands down.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I don't watch a lot of TV at all.
Dude, Severance is worth it.
But
and it's interesting because there's actually some things. This is not really a huge spoiler, but it's a little bit intriguing. There's some things about Severance that actually reference the time period in which we're talking about with this movie Lincoln and the Civil War. In fact, literally, I think at one point, you know, Mary Todd Lincoln, she mentions Cold Harbor, which is something that comes into play in Severance. Like there's something that's like named Cold Harbor. So there's a lot of this interesting cross imagery with like the Civil War era that happens in Severance. Yeah. So highly recommend for you and your audience to give that show a chance, and I guarantee you you will not be disappointed.
Yeah. But
going blind. If you don't know anything about it, go in blind.
Yeah, I've heard great things about the show, but just never seen it. And while you have Apple TV, if you get the month to binge it, go ahead and watch one of my top movies of the year so far, in Deaf President Now. Great documentary.
Okay.
It's if you haven't seen that, you have. I'm assuming you have Apple TV.
Mm-hmm.
You should definitely pop on Deaf President, because you're a documentary man, so I think you'll enjoy it. Really cool story that I had no idea anything about. So, but yeah, I had never seen 28 Days and Weeks Later until the last few days when I caught up with them. So, I liked 28 Days. I did pause it and Google, why does this look so terrible? And I was like, okay, it's not me. It's not my device. It's not my internet. Like it's,
they shot it on prosumer cameras that, your dad could have went and bought at Radio Shack or whatever at the time.
Yeah. Which I think the Google, whatever the Google AI was like, it makes it feel kind of like the CCTV. And I was like, that's fair. I don't know that I want to watch CCTV footage as a movie, but but sure, okay. And this, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I liked 28 Weeks a good bit more than 28 Days Later.
I think that is a slight hot take, but I think I understand.
I think I rated Days like 3.5 and Weeks 4. So I'm hoping Years goes to 4.5. The longer the time elapsed, the better the movie is what I'm hoping.
Yeah. I don't want to deep dive too much into the 28 franchise while we're got all this discussion about Lincoln ahead of us, but I will say I think after seeing 28 Years Later, and then I'm just watching all these like video essays breaking down the whole franchise, I have such a higher appreciation for Danny Boyle and Alex Garland and all the crew and the cast behind it. And there's so many interesting things, like the prosumer camera thing about the first film. And a lot of that was to do with the budget, because it was just, it was shot so cheaply that it's like, well, we can get one proper cinema camera or we can buy like 10 of these, And so, but, and I think a lot of that carries over to, 28 Weeks was shot on more traditional cameras, but they still did use
Right.
some digital stuff. And then, but then, there's all this talk about the iPhones they used for 28
Mhm.
years later. And
Yeah, I saw the
they do
one
some really
picture of the
interesting things with
rig
it.
with like 20 iPhones on it. And I was like, that's a
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
much, but
They do like some poor man's bullet time in the movie, and it looks sick.
cool.
Um, but but yeah, I would just say to those listening, like I highly recommend giving those films a watch, especially if you're a fan
Yeah,
of like
me
anything
too.
zombie related. But also just like it is really fascinating, even if you're not normally a person that's like really into like how movies are made. I do think watching there's this channel called Frame Voyager that has this. They have a video on each of them about the
Hmm.
background and the making of. Highly
Yeah,
recommend giving those a watch. Just really fascinating, just hearing all this background information about how these movies were made specifically.
cool. Yeah, yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I definitely recommend at least the first two. I haven't seen the third one yet, but I've heard nothing but good
I
things. So,
I think it's the best one of the
um,
three,
yeah,
which is
yeah. I
it's
mean,
crazy to think of.
my expectation is that it will be because I've liked
Mhm,
the first, the second more than the first. So
mhm,
surely, you know,
mhm.
years. I mean, you've got years of stuff to work with. Before you just had weeks and days. So, it's got to be better, right?
Hey, 28 decades later, next, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They do have like more
It's
lined
the first
up.
part of a trilogy, yeah. So
Yeah.
part two is
Which I saw.
already set for January.
Okay, I didn't realize that it was that soon.
Mhm.
But I
They were
did
shot
see
back
that
to back.
Nia DaCosta was attached to it.
Yeah, so yeah, she shot 28 years later, The Bone Temple, I believe is the name of it.
Okay.
So
And
they
is
shot
that?
those two back
Do you
to
know if
back.
that's the next one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's gonna be a direct sequel. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm
And I don't
excited.
know what they're doing with part three yet.
I haven't seen the Marvels. It's like the one MCU movie I haven't seen, but I really liked her kind of updated Candyman.
Mhm.
I thought it was pretty good. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like a remake of the
Yeah.
classic Candyman film. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty good. I didn't love it, but I was like, this girl, she's got something. One of those
Mhm.
kind of movies. But yeah, speaking of someone that has something, the Spielberg guy, pretty good.
Yeah,
Pretty good
objectively,
director.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah. Some might
He's
say he might be the GOAT, but I
yeah,
don't know.
got 50th anniversary of Jaws this summer. Pretty exciting.
Hmm
Um,
I'm hoping to catch did the re-release of it come out yet or no?
I don't know. It seems like it comes out like once a summer.
I hate when they do these re-releases or they do like an old film just in general and they only do it for like a day or two. I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
come on, give me some more
Like,
time.
give it at least a week,
Like when they did
Um,
the 20th anniversary re-releases of the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings, and each one was like only one day.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh come on, bro.
can't take off work for the for
Yeah.
you got to
Gonna
give me
call
some
it sick.
time, some options, But no, let's jump into Lincoln talk. Lincoln, it's okay. So usually we start at the beginning of the movie, but I think we should also for this one give a little bit of Spielberg life context,
Mhm.
because it's been a while since we've kind of touched in on like where he is in his life. It's interesting, I've already recorded the Bridge of Spies episode, so that'll be coming out in a couple weeks. And we touched on this a little bit, but Spielberg's at an interesting point in his life because
Mhm.
his kids are getting older, and he's built this like interesting balance, which I think is like pretty admirable of like producing and directing like a madman, but also like feeling like a legit family man, like spending, obviously a decent amount of time with his family. And I think part of it is, the way he's like structured when he's filming movies, like, so it's like really ever since I would say like Hook, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, that run of 3, like that was like the first run of 3, and then he'll take like a couple years off and then do another like run of 3. And so Lincoln is really like the last of this most recent run of 3 with 1010, Warhorse, and this movie. And so it's just interesting to me, and I guess kind of cool to see like he's really like he's taken on his like manly adult responsibilities pretty well for someone that like started so young in the industry and like is a movie mogul basically. And I just appreciate that. But at the same time, DreamWorks is like kind of on its last leg at this point. They're really like starting in 2008 with like the financial crisis. They kind of like became kind of screwed for money, and so they're like, okay, we have maybe a few more that they had already like started at least pre-production on. Like Lincoln had been in pre-production for a while, as we'll talk about, but they eventually like have to turn to overseas financial help and you know, releasing things through Disney with Touchstone. And yeah, really, I think Bridge of Spies might be like the last proper DreamWorks film, which I think we talk about that in that episode. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like he's coming out of so many. This is like the culmination of so many different parts of his life. His kids are, I think by the time Bridge of Spies comes around, he's starting to become an empty nester, and so yeah, it feels like in Spielberg's life he's kind of in that, you know, as far as his career goes, like his career and personal life goes, he's in that like last 4 hours of this part of his career in private life. Last 4, I guess, months, I should say. Like, you know, kind of like Lincoln is in the movie. This is really the movie set in the last 4 or so months of his life. And so I just thought that was an interesting parallel between where Spielberg is in his life and where the movie Lincoln is in Lincoln's life. Yeah. Let's jump back to the beginning, because this movie starts where most Spielberg movies starts, in his childhood. He talks about going to DC with his dad when he was like 4 or 5 years old. Sees the Lincoln Memorial. He talks about like it's always interesting to me hear Spielberg talk about his childhood, because he has such like vivid memories of his emotions from his childhood, and I don't personally like have that sort of memory of my childhood. And so it's just, I find it fascinating how, you know, I don't think he's like making it up. I think he genuinely like has these vivid, at least like emotional memories of his experiences, which, you know, comes through in the movies obviously. But yeah, just this, he talked about like having fear at first looking up at the Lincoln Memorial, and then like really like looking at Lincoln's face and finding like, I don't know, kind of courage and peace in his face. And really just becoming fascinated with Lincoln from then on.
Which I can definitely understand, because Lincoln, I mean, I don't think it would be too hot of a take to say he probably has one of the most iconic faces of all time. He was just a very intriguing looking guy. Yeah. You know, by all accounts.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the things Spielberg said is that he liked the fact that Lincoln was a bit of an outsider who wasn't really destined for his job and then managed to get to the top. And so like it's definitely like he sees a bit of like himself in not like, I don't think Spielberg at all is like, oh, I'm like Lincoln. That's not really what he's trying to say, but just like, that's like his in route. Like that's something he relates to on a personal level, is like being a bit of an outsider and somehow like finding your way to the top. Which, I mean, he was a bit of an outsider, and he's at the top of the film industry, really. So, but yeah, so in this kind of section of his career, he does a couple of shorts. I meant to try to go find them and watch them, but I didn't, unfortunately, before this. One of them is a 2008 short film called A Timeless Call. He made it for the Democratic National Convention, and it was kind of an ode to veterans, and it has like some of their testimonies. The other was back in '99. It was commissioned by Bill Clinton. It was called The Unfinished Journey, and it's a 20-minute film of U.S. history, in like basically covering the U.S. history in the 20th century, to celebrate the turn of the millennium. Music by John Williams, of course. And they actually, on December 31st, 1999, they projected it on a wall at the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. It begins with words from Lincoln, and it ends with the memorial statue in the film, and it wasn't ever screened again, really. Not officially, anyway. It's interesting, but where that ties into our story is that for that short film, he assembled a team of historians, and there is where he met Doris Kearns Goodwin. She was in the process of writing her book Team of Rivals, which released in 2005, I believe. But she was kind of in the rough draft stages of that book, and Spielberg went ahead and optioned it before it was even done. He got to talking to her about the book and was like, yeah, I want to option this to make a Lincoln movie. Mm-hmm. So this was all the way back in 1999. So this is like, I think this rivals probably Schindler's List for the longest like time in production.
I mean, maybe for Spielberg, but I'm thinking of like something like
for
Martin
Spielberg.
Scorsese's Silence was like 30, 40 years.
No. I don't mean in overall. I just mean for Spielberg for sure. But yeah, I don't remember how long Schindler's was. I would have to go back and listen to that episode, I guess. But yeah, this one is pretty long. So by the time the book was published in 2005, the movie was already in the works. In 2001, John Logan took a pass at the script. He's been a writer on movies like Any Given Sunday, Gladiator, Skyfall. So he's got some good movies under his belt. That didn't work out. They replaced him with a playwright named Paul Webb. He didn't work out either. And finally, they bring in Tony Kushner, who takes it over and finishes it. And they actually were already, working on this movie when they hired him on for Munich. And yeah, so he already knew like, oh, they have this Lincoln movie. And so I guess when they called him up, he was like, yeah, I'd like to take a try at that one too. So get this though. The first Tony Kushner script was 550 pages, which for, if you're like, okay, that's a long book already, but what does that equate to for a movie? Well, that would have been like an 8 to 9 hour film for a 550 page script.
Yeah, typically one page is like 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah,
but that doesn't
like that.
include, but that discludes things like, a paragraph of action, and then the director can come in and decide like, okay, I have this paragraph of action, but then it's going to take like 10, 15 minutes for me to play all this out,
Right. Yeah.
So that's pretty intense.
And you could have a paragraph of action that the director's like, oh, I can communicate this in, 20 seconds of footage, so you never know. But yeah, in general, that amount of pages equates to about 8 to 9 hours, which, would be crazy. But yeah, there's even like a picture, Spielberg shared a picture of himself holding like this huge binder, and the behind the scenes stuff of it, like kind of smirking at the camera, like, "Come on, Tony, like this is this is crazy."
Mm-hmm.
But they did actually initially talk about an HBO series. I don't think talks on that lasted very long. It would have been for sure interesting.
So I'm thinking of something like HBO's John Adams with
John
Paul
Adams,
Giamatti, which
Yeah.
I need to finish it, but I watched maybe the first half and fascinating.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Yeah.
Paul Giamatti, I think, is very underrated as an actor.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Phenomenal.
I always love him in movies. But yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously they can't make a 8 to 9 hour movie. They're not really going to do a HBO series, even though they talked about it for a minute. And Spielberg felt like for a Lincoln movie, it needs to be on the big screen because Lincoln was a monumental president and did monumental things, and he needs to be on the big epic screen. So, which, I kind of agree, let's put the man in his top hat. You can't fit that top hat onto a little TV screen. You got to have a big screen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so they tighten up the script and they focus on 70 pages around the ratification of the 13th Amendment. And so Kushner does revisions for about 3 years. And yeah, they focus on those last 4 months of Lincoln's life. The author of the book, Doris Kearns Goodwin, had kind of like, she was like, man, when they told me that they were going to focus on that, I was just like, oh, that's genius, because that period of his life has like such a perfect beginning, middle, end kind of story, like complete story. And yeah, I agree. But yeah, they initially planned to release it in 2009 for the bicentennial year of Lincoln's birth, but yeah, that didn't happen. It took, I guess it took a while to work down from 550 pages to to what they ended up with. But yeah, I mean, as far as the crew goes for this one that they assembled, kind of a lot of typical names. Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy producing. We already talked about it's kind of based in part on the book. The book covers his whole life. I actually listened to an abridged version of it, which was like 9.5 hours or so on the audiobook.
That was the abridged version?
That was the abridged version. The full version is 41 hours, and I didn't have time to listen to that, so I listened to
just want to clock in real quick, guys.
Yeah.
That's a whole working week right there.
Yeah. Which, when you hear that, it makes sense that the first draft of the screenplay was that
550
long.
pages, yeah, dang.
But yeah, Tony Kushner with the screenplay, he worked with Spielberg on Munich, which was, I loved Munich. I was very surprised. That might be like my most surprising of this series so far. It was because it was a blind spot. I had never seen it before.
It's always been a movie I've wanted to see, and I still haven't gotten around to it.
Oh man, and it's so very relevant too. Like, I think if you sit down and watch it today, you'll be like, wow, this is like incredibly relevant. Who knew?
Yeah.
But yeah, Janusz Kaminski, cinematography, of course. Mitch Dubin doing some camera operation. That Dubin's always operating some cameras for Spielberg.
He's always Dubin, man.
Yeah, he's Dubin the camera.
Dubin. Yeah.
Michael Kahn editing. Michael Kahn, the unsung hero of Spielberg's career. John Williams with the music, of course. For sound, it's like I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is like the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, but I don't know that it's a good thing. What's a group of four? It's like
the Ninja
I don't know. Here we go. They're the oh man, I'm gonna have to edit this down. The four presidents on the mountain. My mind is like totally blank.
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore. Okay. Yeah, they're the Mount Rushmore of Spielberg sound guys. Andy Nelson, Ben Burt, Ron Judkins, and Gary Rydstrom. It's funny because those are all like the major sound players in Spielberg's career, all working on this movie. But it's not like a movie you watch and you're like, man, the sound is incredible. It's pretty like subtle in how it uses sound.
Mm-hmm.
But
even with like
but
the
yeah,
music, I was gonna say like John Williams doing the score.
Yeah.
I noticed there's barely music in this movie.
yeah, it's a very subtle score. Very subtle score, subtle sound, but like very well executed. So it's, I think there's a degree to which you really have to have like the best of the best to pull off those subtle executions of stuff like sound. Ben Morris does the VFX. I think I recognize his name, but he's not as familiar. And there's not a ton of visual effects in this movie. There's like all but 30 seconds of war footage. And other than that, it's just like having people in carriages and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's like I mean we'll get into the plot, but there's like the dream sequence.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Then there's the ending, but for the most part, it's a very practically shot project for sure.
Very much so. Yeah. Which, speaking of practically shot, the production design with Rick Carter is so good with production design. Jim Erickson does the set decoration. Lois Burwell does makeup. She's another Spielberg makeup person. Joanna Johnston's been working with Spielberg on costumes for a while now. Adam Somner working as assistant director. He's a recurring guy. And then Avi Kaufman does the casting. Yeah. I mean, a pretty typical Spielberg crew for this one.
Hello again. Do you know how you can really support the show for free in just a few minutes or less? That's right. Just leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple, or wherever you listen that might allow for ratings and reviews. These really help the visibility of the podcast. In fact, just hit that pause button right now and drop the review right now. And then you can get back to the show. I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay. I trust that you went and left that rating and review now. Back to the show.
This is where the cast is where that Wikipedia page, man, came. I was like, how am I going to talk about this cast? Because there's so many names. There's so many like people to hit on or mention. Because I think they're all they're all very good. This is like a masterclass of like just having tons of like big names in your cast and giving them all just enough to where like you can see like where they
most
can, like,
of them are on screen for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but they're like powerful like while they're on screen. Yeah, let's roll through these. This might be a good little section, the cast for this one. So I have these sectioned off thanks to the Wikipedia page. I had started actually doing this before I found the Wikipedia page and was like, thank God they already did it for me. Because I was like, I'm going to have to Google every single one of these names to figure out, were they on the cabinet or the house? I don't know. So the first we have the Lincoln family and household. Of course, I guess we'll just start off with a bang. And Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, this dude is incredible.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if you can call him a working actor, because he may never act in a movie again. Who knows? He's one of those guys that's
kind
like
of sort of retired.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard like people talk about the way he kind of approaches it is that like if he doesn't feel a need to do another movie, he just won't. So it's kind of one of those things where like he's semi-retired, and if he ever feels like doing a movie again, he will, I guess.
Kind of respect it. I mean, he's put in some of the I think including I think as far as his performances go, I don't think this is necessarily like the best he's ever done. But overall,
Yeah.
over his career, I mean, the man has put in some of the greatest performances of all time.
Yeah, I mean,
There
you
Will
could
Be
argue.
Blood, Gangs of New York. I mean,
Yeah.
just phenomenal.
Bill the Butcher, man. That's quite the character. Uh, the anti Abraham Lincoln in a lot of ways, I guess.
Yes.
I guess you could say the same
Basically.
about There Will Be Blood.
Yo, definitely There Will Be Blood.
The anti.
I also love him
Lincoln.
in. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I've always loved him in the Last of the Mohicans.
See, that's one I
Where
haven't
he-
seen.
Yeah, supposedly for that one, he actually lived out of a tent in the woods for like 6 months
I believe
to
it.
prepare.
Yeah. I believe it. But yeah, he's a cobbler, isn't he? Doesn't he do like shoes? Make shoes? I'm pretty sure. You can if you're listening, you can just Google it real quick, and then you can email me or whatever and tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Dude, I want some DDL shoes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does, or at least he has in the past. But he's a man of many talents. We'll just say that. But yeah, so Spielberg had been after Daniel Day-Lewis for a while now. I mean, why wouldn't he be? And yes, but he sent Spielberg a letter and was like, no, I'm, not really interested in doing the movie. And so, yeah, he Liam Neeson signs on. He was, I guess, like the second choice. Spielberg, I guess, was thinking
Actually would have been wild.
Yeah. I guess he's thinking like he was so good in Schindler's List.
Sure.
I can work with him here for Lincoln. Would have been interesting. He signed on in 2004 and starts prepping. And so all through this like period of like, especially starting probably in like 2006 to 2011, they are doing like all these table reads with all these like potential cast members. But then they're also like reworking the script. And so a lot of time passes. Like they have potential. It's one of those movies that's like, oh, this person's going to be in the movie. But then, like 5 years pass and that person is just not available to be in the movie anymore, sort of thing. And so in 2009, Liam Neeson's life turned upside down. His wife and the actress Natasha Richardson died of complications in a skiing accident. And so he was really like dealing with a lot with that, obviously. And they had a new script, a new Kushner script to work with. And so they did a table read for that. And Neeson said that it just hit him that he couldn't do this anymore. I wrote down this quote. He said, quote, "And there was an intro, and then I see Lincoln, where I have to start speaking, and had a thunderbolt moment. I thought, I'm not supposed to be here. This is gone. I've passed my sell-by date. I don't want to play this Lincoln. I can't be him," unquote. And yeah, just I think for obvious reasons, when you watch the movie and think about a man dealing with like the death of his wife and just seeing this Lincoln and where he is in his career, it's like, man, you have to be in the right spot to like be able to access that and it not like be too personal, probably.
Yeah.
But
Lincoln's dealing with the weight of a lot of things. The weight of, I think most estimates for the Civil War, it's like 600,000 American soldiers on between both sides passed away. So he's dealing with the weight of all of that. And so to think of an actor trying to pretend that while dealing with the weight of actual very real grief and loss, like, a lot of times actors will say that they pull on real experiences to make their performances believable.
Right.
But when something's that fresh and a relationship as intimate as your wife, I mean,
right.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that he walked away. I am surprised that he still did 2 other Taken movies though after this.
I think he was already like on board for like a Taken movie around that time. But that's a little bit different, I think, than playing Abraham Lincoln at the end of his life.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, he called up Spielberg, and his excuse to Spielberg was that he was too old for the part now, and he didn't think he could do it anymore. And Spielberg, of course, tries to, plead with him, like, no, you should do it, and he's just like, no, I can't do it. So I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine a Liam Neeson Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. Like, do you think that would have worked? Obviously, I don't think it would have been as good as Daniel Day-Lewis.
I don't know. I think, look, Liam Neeson can act. Okay,
oh yeah,
let's not. I think he's
great.
He's a bit of a joke now. I'm so excited for him to be in the Naked Gun remake, low key. Like, very excited for that. I think it's the perfect kind of movie for him to be doing right now at this point in his career. But I do know that he is a bit of a meme these days as like the go-to like old man in an action movie. But let's not forget Schindler's List. Qui-Gon Jinn, like he's put in Aslan, from the Chronicles of Narnia. Like he's put in these great roles. I feel like his like his actual like Rush Brogish accent would have come out at some point in the movie, and he would have just started sounding like Liam Neeson. So I don't know. I think there's a version of it where it could have happened, but I don't know if I can see it.
Yeah. I definitely don't think he would have done the same like choice for the voice as Daniel Day-Lewis did, which apparently is like historically accurate. When you look at records, Lincoln did have like a more tenor, higher registered voice.
He was just an awkward guy,
Yeah, but yeah, like a lot of past roles of Lincoln have had like very like quote unquote manly, deep,
7 years ago.
Yeah.
Our fathers.
Like the Henry Fonda from the John Ford Young Mr. Lincoln, like that sort of thing, like very like. But yeah, apparently the higher pitched voice was it's not like high pitched, it's just like a more tenor voice.
Yeah. I mean, he's a Midwesterner.
Yeah. But so Neeson is out. Spielberg writes another desperate letter to Daniel Day-Lewis just on a whim. We'll see. And lo and behold, Daniel Day-Lewis accepts. Why, you may ask? It's probably just good timing. I wrote down this quote from Daniel Day-Lewis that I came across that kind of plays into what we've been talking about with him. He said, quote, "When I was very young, I made a promise to myself that I would only work when I felt compelling need to. The work I do must be of great value to me. If it is not, it is not worth it, and I can do something else. For that reason, I can spend a year without working, then 2 others to invest myself completely on a project. If I worked all the time, I would exhaust my creativity, my desire," unquote. So yeah, he's just like, when I work, I'm going to like be all in. And then when I don't feel like I can be all in, I'm not going to work. So, respect, I wish I could do that, but alas, I have to keep working. And then he has like a year really to prep for this. And he talks about like immersing himself in the role. He said that like a lot of the roles he plays are like the antithesis of who he just is in his daily life. And then like when he started studying for Lincoln, it was like the first time he was like hitting a wall. He said this quote, "I was faced with a man whose life seemed entirely determined by politics. It was much later that I was able to grasp the human being behind the politician, a simple, accessible guy." So he's really like, I mean, Spielberg said like Daniel Day-Lewis read like a ton of books, a ton of Lincoln books to prep for this. He's just like, I mean, he's known for this. He's known for the total immersion in a character. taking in every detail of this guy, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the end of that quote where he says, "I was able to grasp the human behind the politician, a simple, accessible guy." I think it really comes across in this movie. I found myself fascinated every time his Lincoln like had a little anecdote or a little story or a little joke, you know. And even when there's like moments where people there's that one scene where they're waiting on a telegraph and the guy's like, "I don't have time for one of your stories right now."
Yeah.
Or he sometimes he tells a joke and no one else laughs except for himself, and like these little things of like they're like kind of awkward social things, but or I mean obviously, you know, spoilers for American history, but obviously his assassination is what prompts the creation of the Secret Service. So prior to that, you know, the president was a much more accessible person. So just the scenes, some of my favorite scenes of him, I was fascinated by. Like he's just walking around the military hospital, like visiting the soldiers, and I think that's what he was grasping onto, that humanity of the character. I think really comes through in his performance, and demythologizes Lincoln, I think, for us. It really went well.
Yeah, I think so, and it's definitely like what I think what he tapped into. I mean, really, like it's like the trifecta of him tapping into who Lincoln was, Kushner's like script, the way he like wrote this story out, and then the way like obviously Spielberg with the master with the camera, like, you know, you're talking about being captivated. It's like, it's a combination of those three things. It's like Daniel Day-Lewis is tapped into this guy. Kushner's script is really like well written. And then Spielberg knows how to just like move the camera just subtly so that you are like leaning into his story with the camera, that sort of stuff.
Like there's some really great dolly work in this film. When, you know, there's like 2 or 3 scenes I can remember where he's like, you know, in an office surrounded by his cabinet and everyone's arguing, and all of a sudden he gets everyone's attention and starts monologuing, and like you're drawn in by his words and his performance as the camera like slowly pushes towards him, and like you feel that as an audience member. Like I don't, it's almost like even if the camera wasn't moving, I think I still would have felt drawn in, but that subtle just leaning, it helps you feel more connected and drawn more to the words that you say, for sure. Yeah,
it's incredible. And you know, from what I can tell, what I've seen, you know, in the behind the scenes, him and Spielberg worked really well together. Spielberg was like, I didn't question his method. I just was like happy to have it. You know,
you get DDL in your production, you don't ask questions. You just let the man do his thing.
No. Yeah, I mean, he did. He was like, I didn't really give him anything unless he was asking my opinion, like himself. And yeah, he's just like a commanding actor. One of the other actors is the guy that plays Costable. He's one of the writers of the amendment, I think. One of the Republican writers, and he that actor was like, yeah, I showed up on set and I was talking to Spielberg, and he was like, oh, let me introduce you to the president. And he said Daniel Day-Lewis walked in, and it was like he's like talking to him, you know, as Lincoln. And he's like, it was like he was just caught off guard. He was like, this is incredible. And then someone else was talking about how like he would show up on set at like 8:45, you know, walk around and greet everyone in character, and then he would just like sit. I think that specific day he was talking about in particular was, I think it's that scene you're talking about where they're all at the cabinet table and he has like that 3-minute monologue right about, and he said he just like sits down, you know, after greeting everyone, they're ready to shoot, and just like nails it, just like kind of one of those things where all the other actors have to be like on their like 100% A game because he's gonna nail it. So
he's so good that if you're not keeping in step with him, they're gonna know. The audience
exactly. Yeah, and they talked about, like, some of the other actors talked about that. Like, I had to like make sure I was like doing it 100% because I mean, if you screw up the scene, like it's not him. He just nailed it, and like that's on you. So yeah, just Daniel Day-Lewis is just an incredible actor. Excited that I got to cover him. You know, I don't know what all series I'll do in the future. He's not in a ton of movies, so you know, excited I got to cover him in this series for sure. And we'll talk more about him as we go. But yeah, just moving on down the list. Sally Field as Mary Todd Lincoln.
She's great.
Really great. Yeah. Yeah, what did you think of her in this movie?
I really liked her performance. You know, and also I guess it there was almost some nostalgia for me, I guess, because I realized, you know, I have so many fond memories of seeing her in some of the movies I used to watch when I was a kid, like Mrs. Doubtfire, and I think she's in Jumanji, right?
Is she?
I don't know,
Maybe,
but I just remember a lot of like kind of like mid to late '80s and '90s movies. You know, that was kind of maybe her heyday, so to speak. And so seeing her pop up in a movie like this, I was like, oh wow, yeah, Sally Field. Like, I feel like I don't see her in as many things. But I thought she did great. She doesn't necessarily have the most to do, you know, but you know. And as much as I was trying to follow along, there were a few moments where I was like I remember the scene where they're having the after I think it's after he gets reelected, and there's a scene in the house where everyone's coming, and she kind of gets into it with another character we'll talk about here in a minute, because I want to get to it later because I have some thoughts about that. But I was a little confused by what the antagonism was there, but you know I guess I just don't know what the context there was, but I thought she was great. She did a great job. Yeah,
and I think that was set up a little bit because you get the feeling that like Stevens is the House representative you're talking about, and him and his like a little crew of like radical Republicans kind of have like they'll like call Lincoln out for not being radical enough on, you know, ending slavery and stuff like that, and I think that's probably what she was getting at with him. But
she's just like, why you talk about my man like that?
Yeah, exactly,
you know?
Dude. And what's funny is like the vibe he's giving off is like he's kind of enjoying her ripping into him. He's like, oh, I like this lady. But yeah, Sally Field, she was connected really early on in the early stages of development. And once it came around, she really had to fight for the role. She you know, her and Spielberg were, from what I can understand, are pretty good friends, and so she was in constant like communication with him, like, I really, really want to do this. The problem was like by the time the film is actually like going into production, she is 10 years older than Daniel Day-Lewis, when in real life Mary Todd Lincoln was 9 years younger than Lincoln. So there was like that like discrepancy. Eventually, you know, I mean, Sally Field has 2 Oscars at this point, so it's not about like, you know, oh, I don't know if you're going to be good in the role. It's just about like the visual, like, are you just too old? It's just one of those things. It's
just one of those things though, where it's like 99.9% of people that watch this movie are not going to know. I didn't know that Mary Todd Lincoln was younger than Lincoln by that much anyway. And I will say this, in the movie, you don't notice it at all.
No, you don't.
They look perfectly fine together. It's not distracting at all.
But yeah. So eventually Daniel Day-Lewis flies out to LA, and he auditions with her, and they're like, yeah, all right, well, you got it, Sally. And she also, along with Daniel Day-Lewis, stayed in character on set. yeah, really, really awesome. In fact, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who we're going to talk about next, talked about for even like to the day of whenever they recorded the behind the scenes, when he thinks of Sally Field, he thinks of her in that like Mary Todd Lincoln accent and stuff, just because like when he met her, that's who she was being. So
Yeah,
I thought that was funny.
I wonder if that was I don't know. Part of me is like, I wonder if she was like, well, if DDL's going to do it, then I guess I will too. You know, kind of thing.
Maybe so. I did read somewhere that like before their first like film, like their first like day on set together, they took a carriage or a ride or something. I don't know if it was a carriage actually, but a ride of some sort into like Richmond, and like went for like a 2-hour walk together. And then they were like, all right, we got to go back, shooting starts soon. So yeah, I think they were kind of like trying to get in sync in that way. So she was probably just like, yeah, I'll play along with this to stay in sync. Yeah. Which I think is cool. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, JGL himself. Get this.
Another one. This is like, he's in this movie. I'm like, dude, what is he doing these days?
Yeah.
I love JGL.
Yeah, I do too. I love me some JGL, playing Robert Lincoln, the eldest son of Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln. Yeah. So the crazy thing is, Daniel Day-Lewis suggested JGL. Yeah, I mean, that's got to feel real good. Spielberg said that he was like, yeah, what about this, Joe Gordon-Levitt? He said Joe Gordon-Levitt. I was like, that sounds weird, but okay.
Yeah, because this would have been, he would have been coming off of 500 Days of Summer and probably Looper by this point, I'd say.
Yeah, and Dark Knight Rises too, I think.
Well, that's true, but I'm just thinking of like when this movie was in production, Dark Knight Rises probably wouldn't have been out yet. This movie came out in 2012. Dark Knight Rises was 2012 or 2013.
It was like later in 2011 when they shot it.
Okay, yeah, maybe so.
So yeah, but yeah, he's definitely like, he's been good enough to like get the attention of Daniel Day-Lewis. I guess he's a young guy, and I guess he wanted to work with him. So that's got to feel real good. And then of course JGL was just like, yeah, I was working with an absolute legend. Kind of beside yourself on set every day. Of course. But yeah, the rest of the household, you've got Gulliver McGrath as Tad Lincoln. He doesn't really go on to do anything, but is good here. He's fine. Good little kid actor. Not much to do, but does really good. Gloria Rubin plays Elizabeth Keckley, kind of the maid of the house, I guess you would say.
She kind of gave me like the vibe of like Mary Todd's
housekeeper,
like confidant and assistant kind of thing.
Yeah, she's like the housekeeper that like is also like has a close relationship with Mary Todd Lincoln, the lady of the house, I guess you would say. But yeah, she did a lot of like reading up on Keckley, and there's even like books specifically about Elizabeth Keckley's relationship with Mary Todd Lincoln that she read, and she talked about doing like a road trip through North Carolina and Virginia where Keckley was from and stuff. So I thought that was cool, and I think her, along with Stephen McKinley Henderson's character William Slade, who's kind of like the, I guess, butler of sorts for the Lincoln household. They were actually both like really involved in different ways in kind of like the freedom movement. There in DC, they were, Keckley did a lot of stuff like raising money and fundraising, and Slade was like one of the leaders of like a local, like the local DC, just, group of black men working to like get stuff
Yeah.
going. And it's kind of sad they didn't show much of that sort of thing in the movie, but also it just wasn't that movie. So
it was a purely Lincoln focused movie.
yeah.
I love the scene when Tad asks Slade, he's like, "Were you ever whipped?" He's like,
Yeah.
"I was born free, so ain't
Yeah.
nobody ever beat me unless they wanted to get a beating back. Why don't you
Yeah.
ask Miss Keckley?" She was in Slade.
Yeah, and she just like yeah, I was smacked with a shovel before I was your age, and then just like moves on. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's not exactly what she said, but that's what came to me in the moment.
But I will say, Stephen Kinley Henderson, I think he's someone that I've probably seen in other movies before, but I've only recently kind of recognized him because, he's in Dune Part 1. He was great in that, and his little brief role that he had. And also Civil War. They came out
Civil War,
last year.
yep.
He's great.
He's really good in Devs. If you want to go the Alex Garland, back to the Alex Garland really good little show. He's in that. He's really good in that
anything
too.
Alex Garland does, I'm there.
Yeah.
know?
Have you seen Devs?
I've not, but it's on my list.
Yeah, you got to see it. Really good. Anytime Stephen McKinley Henderson pops up, I really, really enjoy him. He, I'd be happy to.
He's got a great vibe.
Yeah, he's got a great vibe. He's
like a
really
Black Santa Claus kind of vibe.
Yeah, it doesn't come through in this movie, but like he's got this like way of like turning on emotion that's like really incredible. You can see it in. I mean, there's like have you seen Lady Bird? He's like briefly in Lady Bird. He's like a theater teacher. And there's like a scene in that movie where he just like he's teaching them about like acting in theater, and he just like tells them to go into this moment, and it like focuses in on him, and he just like starts crying because he like goes somewhere as an actor, and like the emotion like lives in the emotion and starts crying, and it's like, man, this dude is so good. But yeah, I love that guy. He's great. I could have used some more Stephen McKinley Henderson in this movie, but a lot, what we got was good.
I mean, I will say there's, I'm sure we'll talk about the plot a little bit later, but there is the scene right at the end when Lincoln's leaving to go to the theater, where I feel like Steven kind of plays Slade as like, he almost has this feeling of like, this is the last time I'm going to see him. Like there's just something in that look that he gives him. Yeah.
It's one of the parts of the movie that I kind of feel like is one of the few parts of the movie that I feel like is a little bit overbaked. But yeah, I mean, it's not on the fault of Henderson. Like he's great. He's great showing the emotion that he's supposed to show in that scene for sure. But yeah, that's Lincoln's household. Part of the cast. Now we have the cabinet and White House crew. So you have David Strathairn as William Seward, the Secretary of State. He's great. Yeah, just I don't have a whole lot to say about most of these guys. They're just all really good. I guess Seward is definitely like the most prominent of them. And one of the more prominent like figures in kind of like the history of looking at Lincoln and his cabinet. I'll roll through these and then we'll kind of talk about them all in general. Bruce McGill plays Edward Stanton, the Secretary of War. Granger Hines plays Gideon Wells, the Secretary of the Navy. Dakin Matthews plays John Palmer Usher, the Secretary of the Interior. Richard Topol as James Speed, Attorney General. Walt Smith plays William P. Fessenden, the Secretary of the Treasury. James Ike Eichling plays William Dennison Jr., the Postmaster General. Joseph Cross plays Major John Hay, which is Lincoln's military secretary. And then Jeremy Strong plays John George Nicolai, who is Lincoln's private secretary. So that's kind of like the cabinet and White House crew. Were there any like standouts there for you, or
other than David Strahan, and I think he's also the only one that you really understand his name. Everybody else,
Yeah.
like I don't think they even name any of these other guys. Maybe
Yeah.
on occasion, so it's like
yeah,
you don't really get a sense of who's who necessarily, except
Mhm.
for this is the group that sets around him.
right?
You know,
Yeah, and it's tough. Like, it's something that there's another really interesting movie to be made from like the idea of what Lincoln did with his cabinet. That's one of the things the book focuses on is like when Doris Kearns Goodwin was writing the book, she wanted to do a Lincoln book, and she was like, I've got to have a different angle. You know, there's so many books about Lincoln. What angle do I have? Do I have anything? She originally thought she was going to focus on like Lincoln and Abraham and Mary's relationship. But she ended up finding that there's tons and tons of archived letters from people in Lincoln's cabinet and people that worked closely with Lincoln, like to Lincoln, but also like to their spouses about Lincoln, and to like just talking about what's going on to friends. There's just all these letters, and so that's how she like came up with the concept of the team of rivals. Because what I learned that I didn't really know a ton of this history before I listened to the abridged version of the book, but the whole idea of the team of rivals, which is what Lincoln and his cabinet was called, is that he basically hired on Republicans and Democrats that saw him as rivals. He was never supposed to have won the election. Seward was actually supposed to win. He was like the favorite to win. Everyone just kind of assumed Seward was going to win the Republican election, that is, you know, to run for president. And yeah, Lincoln was kind of like a dark horse that like split some voting, and by the third or fourth vote came around, he ended up winning. And so, but then he goes and there was 4 major guys that were up for that Republican nomination that year, and he ended up putting all of those guys in his cabinet. And they all were like kind of pissed that he won, you know, in their own ways, of course. But it's crazy. Like by the time you get to his assassination, and the way she, you know, presents it in the book, you know, these guys are like crying and like talking about how, like, you know, Seward especially, because there was an attempt on Seward's life as well, because people kind of saw him as the Marcus Aurelius to Lincoln's Caesar, and so if we're gonna kill Lincoln, we need to kill, you know, the person that's gonna like make him live on in history. And so Seward had an attempt on his life as well that failed, and Seward, you know, put together, you know, they weren't kind of telling him that because he was in bad shape, and he kind of put together like Lincoln would have been the first one here, like he must be dead, he must have gotten killed. And so he, you know, the way like that section of the book, I was actually like tearing up hearing like how they were talking about and reflecting on Lincoln and what he meant to them after like kind of like hating him for a bit, you know, because he came around and stole this election. Just really interesting. There's I think a whole nother movie to be made about that. That would be really cool. But yeah, not even really like a lot of names I'm very familiar with. Like I'm familiar with Jeremy Strong, and that's really about it. In that list of names, David Strathairn, of course, but Strong is really the only other name that stands out. And I haven't even like seen him in a ton of stuff, I guess. Like he kind of pops up here and there in a few things I've seen, but not in any way that like I'm like, oh yeah, Jeremy Strong, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on. This is one of the more fun groups, I think. The lobbyists and other like Republicans that pop up. So in this group, you have James Spader as W.N. Bilbo, who's
so funny.
Oh man, I love it. This character apparently is like a combination of several real life people, which is typical to do for a screenplay. Makes sense, but
my headcanon is that he's just Robert California playing a bit.
Robert California, yeah.
Just hearing a southern accent come out of James Spader's mouth was very funny.
It's funny, and he's playing a funny guy, a funny role.
Yes.
It's real. So there's the trio of him, James Spader as Bilbo, John Hawkes as Robert Latham, and Tim Blake Nelson as Richard Schell. They're kind of like
Tim Blake Nelson.
I love Tim Blake Nelson
he's so
too.
Good.
Yeah, they're like this trio of, you know, they're not called lobbyists, but they're basically lobbyists going around trying to get
they're
votes
operatives.
for the operatives, lobbyists, whatever you want to call them. They're behind the scenes. Lincoln never actually like directly addresses these guys until towards the end, when he gets real desperate to get these votes for the 13th Amendment. But
I like when Bilbo says, man, he won't even let us use a 50-cent piece because it's got your face on it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Bilbo, he's all the scenes that made me like laugh out loud and not just like chuckle were probably related to him. Like the scene where like the guy's pulling the gun on him is just, that's hilarious. He's like runs back and tries to like take the gun from him and then runs off again. Great. Who knew James Spader had such like physical comedic chops? I didn't know, but now I know. Man, yeah, and John Hawkes and Tim Blake Nelson are also good. I don't know that they're like standouts necessarily.
Of the trio,
but,
James Spader is definitely the standout for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like there's the like race scene where they're all racing to Lincoln's room when the voting gets held up. That's pretty funny as well. And
well, it's that's Bilbo and his two secretaries, right?
Yeah, well, John Hawkes is the one that like has the letter at first that Lincoln takes it
gives
from
him the
him.
note.
Yeah. He like takes it from Latham and gives it to Bilbo, and that's I'm pretty sure unless I'm mixing something.
No. It was his two secretaries, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys are great. They some good little montage sequences with those guys too, as they're going around trying to get some votes. And then you have Hal Holbrook, great actor, playing Francis Preston Blair. Cool thing about Holbrook is he had played Lincoln 4 times before and actually had an Emmy for one of those performances. So I thought that was pretty cool. So he's like he's got some investment in this character in this movie. So, but yeah, I thought he was very good whenever he would pop up. And then his Blair's son Montgomery Blair, played by Byron Jennings, and his daughter Julie White plays Elizabeth Blair Lee. And then a few other names. You have Bill Camp and Elizabeth Marvel playing Mr. and Mrs. Jolly that come into the office and kind of early on. They're fun. And then Epatha Merkerson plays Lydia Smith, who is Stephen's housekeeper. Later on in the movie, very late in the movie, is revealed to be. That's a fun little group. We should definitely talk about the state representatives. There's a lot of these names here too. First and foremost, let's talk about like the main Republican guys. But above all, I mean, Tommy Lee Jones playing Thaddeus Stevens. Oh man, so good.
Yes.
What'd you think about old Tommy Lee in this one.
I gotta say, so I'm thinking back to the scene where he's first introduced. And the way it's shot in a way that you're like, okay, whoever's sitting at this desk, this is going to be like a big reveal of who this person is. And then all of a sudden the camera like turns or pans or whatever, and it's Tommy Lee Jones. And let me say this. Tommy Lee Jones, iconic actor.
Yeah.
Phenomenal actor. Love him in movies like The Fugitive, you know, Men in Black.
Won an Oscar for that.
Just so good. No Country for Old Men, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think he was a little distracting in this movie. He does a great job,
really,
but it's,
okay.
I don't know. It's just so hard for me because he has such an iconic voice.
Yeah, sure.
That it took me out of the movie a little bit. And he does great. All of his scenes are so good, but I'm just like, it's Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I don't know. I do think that that was the one. I'd love to know. You know, maybe I have to do some research on my own. Like, what was the story behind him getting cast in this role? Because I don't know if he had like a physical kind of appearance similar to the person he's to Thaddeus Stevens or what it was. But it was just like one of those roles where I'm just like, I think he does a great job in the movie, but I'm just like, I think I would have preferred someone that disappeared into the role a little bit. Not saying that he doesn't, but it's like, you know, it's like right on the line of like The Rock, right? Where it's like The Rock in his early movies, it's still Dwayne Johnson, but he's not necessarily playing himself.
Sure.
You know, as opposed to like what he's done more recently, where it's just The Rock in a movie. So I think it's because I think also it might be because, you know, Thaddeus Stevens, the way he's written in this movie anyway, he's very sarcastic. He's very quippy. He's got all these reactions, responses to everything. And I feel like maybe I've just seen Tommy Lee Jones play that kind of character in other movies that it didn't necessarily feel like it felt kind of like Tommy Lee Jones is just in this Lincoln movie. Yeah. Okay. For me anyway, personally. I do think he did a great job. I loved his character. I just did find him a little bit distracting, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I don't feel the same way you feel about it, but I definitely understand. I understand where you're coming from. I mean, it's kind of like I was thinking about, okay, what's a parallel for me? And the thing, so we can reach back into this same series. And there's a degree to which Tom Cruise.
I do want to say real quick, I just looked up a picture of Thaddeus Stevens, and low-key, he does kind of look like Tommy Lee Jones. So I see why.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, so Tom Cruise, he, you know, he's Tom Cruise. There's a degree to which it's hard to believe Tom Cruise as an everyman kind of figure, and that's what he's supposed to be in War of the Worlds, and it's just kind of hard to buy. You know, it's like you're watching the movie and you're like, I mean, come on, it's Tom Cruise, he's gonna save the day. Like, you never really kind of, it's hard to buy into like, oh, this guy's gonna like get screwed over by the aliens, because you're watching it and you're like, oh, it's Tom Cruise, like he's gonna beat the aliens, like, come on.
Yeah, I actually don't necessarily agree with that take either. I think he kind of plays
that's
fair
fair
a little bit in the film, but I understand where you're coming from.
But I'm making like the something that an opinion that I had that about like not being able to see past the actor. Yeah. Yeah. It's
that's what I'm saying.
I've experienced it before. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can. I think we're both like you don't necessarily fully agree with my take, but you understand it, and I feel the same way about that. Where it's like I understand what you're saying, even if I'm like I kind of see it a little bit differently. But yeah, I don't know. It was just like I was just like, oh, it's Tommy Lee Jones. I also thought he like was wearing a really bad wig the whole movie, and then you find out at the end of the movie he actually is a wig. Yeah. So it's like, okay.
Oh man, yeah, and I mean, yeah, there's a degree to which like Tommy Lee Jones is like iconic, and like you're thinking about like all of his other roles, and you know, you mentioned some good ones. Actually, like the role, one of his lesser roles has like the Tommy Lee Jones quote that like I probably think about the most. It's in that movie Man of the House, where he's like having to watch cheerleaders. He's like an agent, and he has to like pretend to be their, I don't know, their coach or something. And they tell him to put on a happy face, and he goes, "This is my happy face." You know, with his iconic Tommy Lee Jones straight face.
Iconic Tommy Lee Jones like monotone.
Yeah.
You know, I love him as an actor. He's played so many iconic roles. I love, you know, in The Fugitive, that scene where they're in that tunnel right before Harrison Ford jumps. Yeah. He's like, "I didn't kill my wife," and he goes, "I don't care."
Yeah. Yeah. And the speech of like when he's sending out everybody on the hunt, like, oh man, iconic. So good. But yeah, Tommy Lee Jones, like, I respect your opinion. I see where you're coming from. I didn't get that. I loved Tommy Lee Jones in this. And I think it's because it's actually like, I think we think the same thing, but just have like, we're coming out on different ends on it. Like, you're like, it's just another Tommy Lee Jones role. Like, he's doing the same thing he does in a lot of other stuff. And you're like, so, you know, it kind of took me out. And for me, I'm like, and so I was all in, you know, when he's like going on tirades against other members of the House, which apparently, like, from what I could tell from my research, is like a lot of that stuff is like historically accurate. Like, on the one hand, that's how they would talk to each other on the house, on the floor of the House. And then on the other hand too, like some of those things like are actually like recorded that he actually said. I don't know like what percentage necessarily are things he actually said, but I like to think that he called someone more lizard than man on the floor of the House. And you know, honestly, like we could probably use a little bit more of that fieriness in our on the floor of the House
certainly
today.
The eloquentness, for sure.
Yeah. That it's like the most eloquent like insults, like so it's hard to be like, oh, this guy like doesn't have it all together, because you're like, man, he's really like leaning into his anger and tirading, but man, he sounds good while he's doing it. So
no, you are more lizard than man. It's not someone calling, you know, oh, this guy's got little hands, you know, which is unfortunately became a big thing not that long ago on debate floors in front of the whole country. Yeah, if you know, you know. David Costabile, we talked about him, plays James Ashley. So Stevens, Ashley, I think some others are the ones that like drafted the 13th Amendment. But those are the two main guys that you kind of see the most of. Some other ones, Bill Raymond plays Schaller Colfax, who's the Speaker of the House. And then Stephen Spinella plays Asa Venter Lytton, who pops up a few times. He's kind of like, he's got like the little goatee and ponytail. He's the other radical Republican that like confronts Tommy Lee Jones's Stevens after he like doesn't stand on equal. He's trying to get the bill passed, and he comes in and is like, "You're a phony" and all that. It's that guy. Yeah, because Ashley asks him to say that he only sees African Americans as equal under
the law or whatever,
not equal to white men,
and not equal in all things, I think is the way it's phrased. But and he says that even though he doesn't believe it, because that's the only way they're going to get the bill passed.
Right.
But yeah,
I believe him and Asa are like the two like super staunch like radical abolitionists. Yeah,
they are. And there's another like there's a little scene where we get to see like the whole crew of radical abolitionists all together. But yeah, the main Democrats You have Lee Pace playing Fernando Wood and Peter McRobbie playing George
good.
Pendleton. Yeah, both of those guys are great.
They like the way they play off each other, but especially Lee Pace, like that guy. He just, man, he plays a great bad guy in general. I mean, this Ronan the Accuser. He's in Foundation, the show on Apple TV.
Okay.
He's kind of a villainy kind of character in that show.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's just got a presence about him. I think that really
he's in
really well.
Guardians.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Ronan the Accuser.
Yep.
In the first Guardians film.
Yep. Oh yeah. That I forgot the character's name, so it didn't click with me when you said it. But yeah.
He's also in the Hobbit films. He plays the Elf King, but I can't remember his name.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Lord of the Rings fans are gonna rip us a new one for that, but
I mean, maybe not, because Lord of the Rings fans don't necessarily like those movies, so I think you're good.
It's like Thandriel or something, I think.
Something like that. I don't know. It's hard. Who can blame anyone for not keeping up with all the Tolkien names? I don't know. Yeah. Him and Peter McRobbie as Pendleton are both great. And then the other, I think guy that pops up the most of the Democrats is Michael Stuhlbarg as George Yeaman. He's kind of like he's the guy that he's like a Democrat that leans abolitionist, but doesn't actually want to vote for it. He thinks it's just getting in the way of more important things, I guess, like ending the war. So he's the guy that yells "Yay!"
Yeah, I love that scene. I thought my audio cut out because it gets it goes silent for a second. He mouths, "My vote ties us." I thought my audio stopped working, but
yeah, he did.
I will say, I do think, not that I necessarily agree with him originally wanting to say nay, but it is interesting when he brings up the idea of the country's not ready for emancipation. What do you think are going to happen to these people afterwards? Because when you, historically speaking, he almost kind of had a bit of a kind of foresaw the lack of structure that needed to be put in place for sure. But I do think that definitely is one of the most memorable scenes, and I love him also singing with all the Union guys. The Union boys right after it passes. I think that was really good.
Yeah, it was good. And I thought he was really good in his most of these are very sparse roles. They're on screen all of 10 minutes at the most. But they're
most of these guys are literally a face in a crowd. Almost literally. But he definitely is a standout. They're
knocking it out, really. And he definitely has a point. A good question asked. But I think Lincoln's assassination really screwed up Reconstruction. I think it would have been very different with Lincoln still at the helm.
Especially because at the time, the person you lost against in the race automatically became your vice president still. And so then Andrew Johnson comes in.
No, not at this point.
No? Okay. Well, I thought it was. But I do know that Andrew Johnson was his vice president, and he was probably one of the worst presidents we've ever had. It just completely tried to undo everything that Lincoln put into place. So it does often make you wonder. And one of the biggest questions of American history is if Lincoln had survived and been able to live through his full second term, what would have happened in Reconstruction?
And it just it goes back to what I was talking about earlier of the team of rivals stuff. A lot of those guys on the cabinets highly disagreed with what Lincoln was trying to do, but at the end of the day, what's fascinating is at the end of the day, those guys, after they came out of the cabinet room and let Lincoln have his piece, telling him what he wanted to do, they all backed him.
Lincoln
fascinating.
It seems like Lincoln was really the type of man that was able to bring people to his side of things. Through however he managed to do it, but definitely seems like the type of guy who just had the kind of mannerism that people are like, you know what, I don't like the man, but dang gummit, I'm gonna do what he asked me to.
Yeah. Speaking of voting the way Lincoln wants you to, there's also some swing voters and others that we should mention. More just guys that are like on screen for like all of 1 or 2 minutes, but really solid. Boris MacGyver as Alexander Kofroth, one of the
Great
swing
scene.
voters. Yeah.
Where he goes to meet with Stevens and just is obviously terrified of the man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Oh, man. Walter Goggins plays Clay Hawkins.
Love Walter Goggins.
Yeah. David Warshawski, William Hutton, Michael Stanton Kennedy as Hiram Price, Rainer Skeen as Josiah S. Beanpole Burton, who has like one line in the movie and nails it.
Beanpole Burton says I.
It's great. Wayne Duvall plays Bluff Wade, and then Christopher Evan Welch plays Edward McPherson, the clerk at the house, who somehow pulls off like the performance of stating people's names of the century, I think.
Was it the one guy who says nay and then he says I? He's like, no, abstain.
Yeah.
I love that little shot, the reaction shot where he just kind of like stares and he holds it, and like he holds it for the perfect amount of time, just a few seconds, and then he like you see him like crossing out and like rewriting. It was perfect.
Just kind of like this look
just
of
a
disdain.
perfect amount of annoyance in his face. Not too much.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. So, shout out to Christopher Evan Welch, nailed the clerk of the house, that's all the main house people. Union Army guys, Jared Harris plays Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant.
I love Jared Harris.
Yeah, he was great.
It's always nice seeing him pop up in something.
Yeah. And I didn't know this actor was in this movie, but sure enough, like he pops up and I'm like, Adam Driver. Yeah. Samuel Beckwith.
Before he was kind of big. I mean Star Wars really did numbers for his career for sure, but he did stuff before.
He really he had stuff before this, but not really anything. He was more like, I think, in his stage acting career at this point. But yeah, he plays
I think he maybe
Lincoln's
done some stuff on TV.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. He plays Lincoln's telegraph operator Samuel Beckwith, who actually historically was Grant's telegraph operator, but for the sake of the movie, I guess they moved him over to the White House. Clarence Key Driver, before I move on, he does like have like a little back and forth with Lincoln that like shows like, oh man, this Adam Driver guy, like pretty good.
He's going places.
Yeah. So I thought I'd mention that. Clarence Key plays Seth Williams, the Inspector General. Most of these guys just kind of pop up. Asa Luke Tucrow plays Lieutenant Colonel Eli S. Parker. We can talk about these two guys, Coleman Domingo and David Oyelowo, playing a couple of black Union soldiers there at the beginning. Really good.
It was great, but it was like one of those things where, I think Coleman Domingo is kind of more recently kind of become more of a publicly known name.
Yeah.
But David Oyelowo, I forgot his last name. Oyelowo, like I've seen him around in a lot of different stuff, and I think he's pretty notable. So it was really interesting to see him. Really, only in like the first 5 minutes of the movie that he hasn't come back to do anything. Yeah,
and I think that is like one of the there wasn't like a ton of like major criticism against this movie, but one of the things that did, like, if there was a criticism, it was just like the lack of like focus on black characters in the movie.
Yeah, there's not a really strong black voice in this movie.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And so
there's like one scene between Lincoln and
Keckley.
Yeah.
There's that scene and there's this scene, and that's really it. It's what I do appreciate is that like one thing that this, so first I'll say it's a fair criticism. Like, you know, it's one of those things where like my defense would be, it's just not that movie. It's about, because like at the end of the day, it's not even really like a Lincoln biopic. It's like it's like a political thriller, you know, kind of courthouse drama with like Lincoln as like the fulcrum, you know. And it, because I don't know, it doesn't really feel like a traditional biopic at all. Because it's focusing on one part of his life. It's focusing on a particular like event, really. Because really the movie is about passing the 13th Amendment. You get a feel of who Lincoln was, but like at the end of the day, the movie like rises and falls on the 13th Amendment getting passed, not like learning about who Lincoln is, if that makes sense. And so like there's a degree, like that would be like my defense, and probably like Steven Spielberg's defense and all the people that made it, is like, well, we just weren't making that movie. And that's fair, but I also think it is fair to say like, okay, you know, maybe we could have had a little bit more of this. But I will say what I do like about that one scene with Oyelowo is that it doesn't like, you know, when it starts and it's like Lincoln sitting up there all folksy looking, you know, it's like, oh, here we go. You know, you could supposedly think like, oh, here we go, you know, white savior kind of thing going on. But like, it doesn't really set it up that way. It sets it up as like Oyelowo going like, hey, like, do you actually care? Like, you know, and Lincoln's kind of like backpedaling a little bit and being like, oh, well, you know, telling the story, not really answering necessarily. And so I guess I appreciated that, like you know, at least the two times that you have a black character talking directly with Lincoln, they're really like kind of questioning him and pushing back on like, are you doing enough? Like, so I did appreciate that, I guess, aspect of it. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that whole idea.
Yeah, I do think it was interesting to kind of see they both kind of challenge him a little bit.
Yeah.
And it kind of sets it was an interesting, I don't know, that whole scene to me felt a bit off. I feel like it was I don't know what it was about it, but just like you see Coleman Domingo and then David, and then, you know, these other two guys, these two white soldiers come in. We'll talk, you know, Lucas Haas and Dane DeHaan.
Yeah, two recognizable names actually. Yeah.
Definitely recognizable faces for sure, and but also I think this is like, I want to say Dane DeHaan's like big break was Chronicle, and this is like a few years before that.
Yeah.
And he's so good in that movie. But it was nice to kind of see. It's always interesting watching a movie like this, and you're like, oh wow, like some of these people are like kind of big names now that at the time like weren't as much, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like seeing like I think of like someone like every time I see like Paul Dano, you know, pop up in a bit part in an older film from like the, you know, mid 2010s.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But yeah, I don't know. There was just something about the way it was edited or something that I was just like, wait, what? What's going on? So, yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can round out the cast. There's a few Confederates to mention. I'll actually start with the last one. Christopher Boyer plays Robert E. Lee, who you see for like 2 seconds. Like,
doesn't even say anything.
No, he just kind of like gets on his horse and rides off. But then you have the three. Hat. Yeah, the hat. Yeah. The three main ones are Jackie Earle Haley, who plays Confederate Vice President Alexander H. Stevens, Gregory Itzen, I don't really know how to pronounce that, playing John Archibald Campbell, the Assistant Secretary of War for the Confederates, and then Michael Shiflett playing Robert M.T. Hunter. He plays the kind of third delegate there. Those three guys are kind of like the delegates from the Confederacy that show up to quote unquote negotiate with Lincoln.
It's really interesting that they are, as far as I remember, even though I just watched the movie, I think they're the only three characters that get like a title card, like naming who they are, which is really interesting decision.
I think Grant gets one too, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I think it's in the same scene too.
Maybe so.
Or no, I think it's them first when they get to the carriage, and then the riverboat.
Gotcha.
When he gets off, he's like, there's that shot of the riverboat, and then it kind of pans over to him. I think you're right. He does get one.
Yeah. I guess they were just like, how are we going to introduce these guys? Oh, we'll just throw it on the screen.
Why not?
Yeah, I was fine with it. Yeah. So all that was, I mean, just a huge cast of people, you know. Obviously, like a lot of those names we just kind of like read. We just read a list of names. But, you know, how often are these people getting shouted out for playing a great like 10 seconds on screen? So I just wanted to give, you know, all those names a shout out. So
yeah, I'd imagine a lot of those kind of unknown names to us anyway are probably a lot of like more like theatrical stage actors kind of guys.
And I'm glad you said that, because someone did mention in the behind the scenes that like, you know, there's tons of extras in those House of Representatives, you know, sequences, and a lot of those guys are stage actors, that are mostly in the background, but probably some of those more prominent ones too, I would imagine. Production, we can talk through a little bit of this. It's shoots from October through December 2011. It's mostly shot. It's pretty much completely shot in Virginia, mostly in Richmond. And the governor there kind of gave them free reign. They had some scheduling with the government. You know, Richmond is I think the state capital, and you know they have all the state government buildings there, and they did some scheduling magic where they could use the government buildings and some of the rooms for various scenes. So yeah, really cool. They also used Petersburg, Virginia, which has a lot of like historical architecture for some outside scenes and whatnot. But yeah, really just completely shot there in and around Richmond, Virginia, which is ironic because that was the seat of the Confederacy during the war.
Yeah.
So,
well, and this is the area that my my grandparents were living in before my grandpa passed away. My grandma still lives in the area, and so you know when I went to go visit them, they live in this little town called King George, which is like there's like this little part of Virginia that kind of juts out into the Potomac River, and they're like really close to where, like literally, like they have like a little road you can walk down, and you can actually have like a little dock overlooking the Potomac River. So
that's cool.
It's just it was really cool just being in that area, like being like a history nerd of like colonial America, the Civil War. Because dude, you're driving around and like there's like a bunch of little farms, and some of those farmhouses have been around since the 1700s. You know, it's just crazy. If you love like this era of history, it's definitely worth a trip to some of these kind of like smaller towns in that area, because you'll still see a lot of this historical architecture everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we can jump down and talk about that stuff. So, one of the cool things just about the design and like the location, well, for one, Rick Carter had been on the project since the beginning, basically since 2002. He was working with Spielberg on it. He had read like Doris Kearns Goodwin's book in detail. She does a lot of, not in the abridged version, because he was talking about it and I was like, I didn't get a whole lot of any of that, so it must have just been in the full version of her talking about like his Lincoln's office and stuff like that. yeah, he was inspired by the description of the rooms and the architecture in her book. But one of the cool things is the Richmond Capitol building has very, very similar architecture to the White House. And so they basically built this huge portico off the front of the Richmond Capitol building to make it look like the White House. So it's just this huge structure that, like, it's not like obviously against the the state capitol there, but it's like it's close enough where you can get the camera angle where it looks like it's the portico is attached. And yeah, they just built it, huge portico, and yeah, looks pretty good. It's the stand-in for the White House.
Facades like that happen much more often than you would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other like government building they use, the Virginia House of Delegates, is what they used for the House of Representatives set. So that is actually like the Virginia House setup.
Great set.
Yeah. And they didn't change a whole lot to it. They probably added a few historical things, but yeah, they filmed there for like 2 weeks in pretty much chronological order for the movie. And, you know, it was one of those things where it just worked out with scheduling. They weren't using it for a couple weeks, and they were like, yeah, y'all can film in there. So pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the design, I think, of this movie is one of those things that just like, you don't necessarily like think about it while you're watching the movie, but I think that's like probably because it's done so well that it's not like sticking out. It's just like a ton of small details that add to the feel of the movie. That's just incredible.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, Rick Carter had like details down to like just like maps on the walls and tapestries and the wallpaper design. And they had people like write out replicas, like handwritten letter replicas of tons of letters written to and from Lincoln, and that are just scattered about like his office that you see. Those are all like someone was saying, you could just walk around that set and pick up one and just read it, and it's an actual like letter, a replica of a letter that Lincoln wrote or that was written to Lincoln. Really cool. Just tons of details like that I think is really incredible. Yeah. What did you think about the design of the movie?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I definitely had some thoughts kind of more along the lines of like the cinematography and lighting and things like that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
As far as the design itself, like, yeah, it just feels real, you know?
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're watching like an archival footage of what it was really like. Like I think you hit the nail on the head where you said like you don't really notice it because it doesn't stick out because it's just so well done, and it just instantly feels like you're transported to the, you know, kind of mid 1860s.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, you know, Rick Carter talked about his office and living quarters, but especially his office being like kind of the heart of the movie as far as design goes, and just focused a lot of his attention on that. And then like Joanna Johnston with the costumes too. You know, I mean, she always does, whenever I've seen her on like special features, she's like always talking about like all the research she's done on costuming for whatever period it is. And she said that she focused on, when designing like Lincoln's costume, she focused on the silhouette as the foundation, which I love, because I feel like Lincoln is the most like silhouettable figure in maybe all of human history.
Yes.
And so yeah,
that nose,
nose, the hat, like the you know, coat, jacket, whatever. Beard. Yeah, it's great. She was able to like study the Lincoln hat at the Smithsonian and had one made at this place in Italy that makes hats like that. And she was studying like Mary Todd Lincoln's favorite colors and styles from pictures and paintings of her. She even like so I remembered this in the book. It talks about Seward wearing this like yellow robe, as he's like going around, and like he was much more like the typical like politician that's like a man of the people, like really knows how to work the crowd and that sort of thing. And she talked about him being very fashion conscious, and it does in the book talk about him wearing this yellow robe, which you see in the movie at one point, which I thought was cool. So and then too, just the makeup. There's a lot of facial hair in this movie, a lot of like really great facial hair. And they're having to do this for, I think there was like especially like the house sets. I think I have it written down. Yeah, there was like 58 actors and over 230 extras at any point in time for especially those bigger sets like the house stuff. And they can't really sit down and do like 30 minutes to an hour on everybody's face. They're having to like work through all those facial hairs. I think they said like 65% of it was the makeup lady said there was like 65% of the people in the house scenes have facial hair that they had to do.
Yeah, stuff like that's always going to be a mix of some people it's like their actual facial hair they've just cut to look more period.
But they still have to like groom those for them.
Yeah. With a lot of like the major actors, it's probably going to be more like, could be more prosthetic facial hair. Yeah.
Well, like
just kind of depends.
The other thing I thought was really smart was she talked about the makeup, Lois Burwell. She talked about that Lincoln's face is really just like an interpretation of Lincoln's face to fit Daniel Day-Lewis's face. So they didn't really do prosthetics on his face. It's all like painted makeup. And I thought that was really smart too. Adds to the realness of it all. Let's I guess we can talk about a little bit of like what it was like on set, because this is a little bit interesting and different for a Spielberg set. Spielberg, I know for sure on the 2 weeks that they were on the floor of the house and shooting those scenes that Spielberg was in a suit and tie for all of those. I don't know that he was like that for the whole shoot, but I know for sure those 2 weeks he was. So it's just like one of those things where he's basically like, he announces that, hey, in between takes, we're not doing like idle chit chat. You can talk about that when you're off set. Just like really taking it seriously. It reminded me of like, really the only other time he's like this is Schindler's List. It's like when there's this
serious like subject matter.
Yeah, this weight of like, I have to like do this story right, because Spielberg is typically like the shorts and t-shirt and ball cap, director. But yeah,
hey,
like,
we're all just here to have a good time.
Yeah. And he's still like Spielberg, but just like in a bit more of a serious mode on set. But yeah, the big thing with Spielberg at this point is, he's like, for one, like, I think he's an underrated director of actors. It doesn't really get talked about much, but I think he's like really great at directing actors. One of the things that like, one of the things that stood out to me in the special features was Sally Field just talking about, there's the scene where her and Lincoln are really like getting into each other. And she was having a hard time with that scene and really like struggling big time. And she said in between takes one time, she was just like feeling really, really down about it. But she like glanced over, and Spielberg was looking at her, and he just like mouthed, "I love you" to her. And she was like, that was like all she needed. She was like reinvigorated. And so just like not just like directing actors but having like emotional intelligence to know like, oh, like Sally's really struggling. She needs me to like give her something.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Spielberg, he's like showing up on sets and walking around and being like, okay, here's what we're going to do. He's not in the storyboard phase of his career anymore. He's all about like filling out the space. And so, yeah, let's talk about on that note, the cinematography and the camera work. 'Cause this is maybe where you're in your bag a little bit more.
A little bit.
JP. Yeah. What did you think? I'll get your thoughts before I dig into my notes.
Yeah, I really loved it. Like I don't think, it's really interesting because I don't always think of Spielberg movies as like the most like awe-inspiring cinematic films, even though there are plenty of amazing shots but in Spielberg films, but I always think it's more of the way in which he utilizes the shots, like the overall production, not like a single frame always. But I do think this is a movie where I love the framing, I loved the lighting, that just felt very lived in. I think sometimes I feel like sometimes movies can kind of run into this issue where, especially like, a lot of the modern stuff we do that are very VFX heavy, you have to like completely light someone 360 degrees. And then sometimes they don't fit the scene that you're putting them into because, maybe the sun is obviously behind them, but they're still being face lit, kind of thing. Like there's no shadow on their face because it's a VFX shot and you got to have them fully lit. So it's just so nice to see a movie like this where it's like, man, like there's scenes where like people are in a dark room and the room is actually dark. And there's scenes where like there's like a bright light at a window and someone's face is kind of shaded, but they have it exposed properly to where you can still see them. But yeah, there's a lot of little moments, kind of like I was talking about a while ago, with just some of those classic Spielberg dolly shots and kind of. I don't really think there was there wasn't really any specific like Spielberg oneer in here, but there were quite a few really nice kind of longer takes where the camera subtly moves. I honestly I think my favorite sequence in this whole movie is the vote scene. I just love there was. I feel like the way it was shot, the way it was edited, like it actually built some tension up for me.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously, that this amendment passes, but I couldn't remember if it passed the first time it was voted on. You know what I mean? So but there's this tension, and honestly, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the poker sequence from Casino Royale. Because I feel like it took something that could have been very boring, just a bunch of just asking for all these delegates to vote yay or nay on this bill, the same way where it takes a game like I think they play poker or Texas Hold'em in that game, like in the movie. I can't remember, but it takes something like a poker game, and it turns it into this like kind of like really invigorating sequence, and so that's kind of something I thought I had while watching it. Is like I feel like this is like doing for this scene the same thing that Casino Royale did for poker, where it takes this thing that could have been very boring and mundane, and it presents it in a way that it actually is kind of a little suspenseful and builds up with some tension, especially with some of the swing delegates, where up until that moment where they're called on, like yeomen. Like you don't know which way they're gonna fall. But I really love the lighting because it all felt very very natural.
Yeah, and man, that I love that you brought up the voting scene, because I think that's another example of just like the like top level Spielberg work comes into comes and matches up with like the work that Kushner's been doing with the script, because it's one of those things. So Spielberg is already like one of, I think, his hallmarks that maybe doesn't get discussed a lot is that he's really good at like efficiently setting up a character. He can like have a 1 to 2 minute scene with a character in it, and like you just like you get everything you need to know about that character in that scene, and they might not pop up for in the movie ever again, but like you like know that character. And I think this is one of those cases where like that aspect of like Spielberg like matches up with like Kushner's writing, where you have all these guys, especially, you know, you mentioned the swing voters. You have all these guys that you've seen for maybe like 30-second to 1 minute scenes and like montage sequences of like them trying to like get them to switch their votes or vote, you know, yay or whatever. And then, so when you get to, you know, when you get to that voting sequence, like I kind of like was able to track a lot, not all of them because there's so many, but like I would say the majority of them I was able to be like, oh yeah, that's that guy that had this, you know, oh, the guy that's praying, that's the guy that his brother died. Oh, this guy is the like cowardly guy, you know, that has to talk to Stevens. Oh yeah, that's the beanpole guy from that was connected to those two, you know, citizens or whatever they were at the beginning, the Bill Pullman character or whatever. And yeah, and so like it's just really incredible, like and the way it's like cut together, and the way, you know, you mentioned like the way he like lingers. There's a lot of like lingering on this in this movie. Spielberg talked about one of the things he was thinking about in this, especially even with like the Lincoln scenes, is like really leaning into like pregnant pauses, and then also like leaning into the fact that a lot of the movie is actually not Lincoln talking, it's him listening. And it's something that you don't really notice, but then like when I heard Spielberg say that, I'm like, that's true. Like he has these monologues and speeches that he gives, but other than that, it's just him like listening.
And a lot of those monologues are like, I can think of the two that I can think of that happened in his office. Both times it's after a minute or two or several minutes of like everyone else talking, he's just kind of sitting there, and
like
then finally
him
like
sharpening his pencil. That was like a choice Daniel Day-Lewis came up with of like,
and then he finally is like, listen, okay, and man, I love what you said about pregnant pauses, because man, dude, I think the biggest thing that I have noticed in cinema and movies and television as well in the last 5 years maybe is, dude, the art of the pause is lost.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times like I've watched something that's come out more recently, and I'm just like, two characters talking, and it's like, say something, say something, say something, say something, say something. And I'm like, dude,
well, everybody wants to be Aaron Sorkin.
Give it room to breathe, man.
Yeah.
It's a combination of that, and people don't have very short attention spans these days.
Yeah.
But it's like I dude, there's nothing that'll make me like get fed up with a movie or a TV show quicker than not giving conversations room to breathe. And so I love when a movie knows when to do that. I mean, because you don't always have to do that, right?
Yeah.
But we just live in a world of so many quippy characters with always having something to say these days, and I think it's nice to remember a time in which people appreciated pauses.
Yeah,
you know?
and I think too, like just it being about Lincoln, like it kind of matches how he kind of conducted himself. You know, you think about the couple of scenes where you get him trying to get people to vote, yes on the amendment. And both of them that I can think of, like when he leaves, like he doesn't know which way they're gonna go. He kind of says his piece, and then he's kind of
Moves
like,
on.
okay, you do with that what you will. I can't. I've said what I can say, and that's all I can do, and I'm gonna move on, and hope that you do the right thing. And that's kind of a lot of what Spielberg's doing with the camera, with these lingering shots and these pauses and, the slow and subtle movements. He talked about really trying to catch the cadence of like a stage play with the camera movements. They're very reduced and slow, but, and I think still pretty dynamic. It reminded me a little bit of just the mastery of Martin Scorsese with camera movement. If you like watch a Scorsese movie, there's hardly any time where a Scorsese camera is sitting still, but it's never like moving where you notice that it's moving, if that makes sense. He's always like, even if it's just like someone giving a monologue, like the camera's doing something, it's pushing in, it's moving, on a dolly or something like that. Like, and Spielberg's doing his best, like Scorsese in that way in this movie, like really dynamic, what he's doing is like he's it goes back to what that kind of like thing we talked about at the beginning, like you're leaning in as the camera leans in. It's this energizing of these dialogue scenes, because it is a dialogue heavy movie, but it doesn't feel like a fast-paced Aaron Sorkin script, it's a different kind of heavy dialogue. And really, really incredible, I think, camera work. And, you mentioned images too. They studied actually a ton of still images, period still images, because there's huge archives of still images from back then. And so that really influenced the style of the way they shot things. And they were kind of trying to capture that still image quality in some of these shots, that I think comes across,
Yeah, I think of, the phrase, every frame a painting, right?
Yeah.
Is what people like to utilize when they reference film. And, for a lot of movies, that's true. For even more movies, that's not really true.
Right.
But I do think this is a movie that feels very painterly.
It does.
The way that it's framed and shot. There's a lot of scenes where it's like, I'd love to jump on like, one of these websites that does like screenshots from films that you can use for like pitch decks and inspiration and stuff. And I would really love to just go through and just look at some of the still frames from Lincoln, because it really is beautiful. And I also really love the color grade. I think it felt, again, that's another thing about Spielberg is he's not really, like, when I think of his movies, I don't really think of any movies that like a color grade really sticks out too harshly. I mean, maybe like the only one I can really think of is like Minority Report, because it kind of has that weird that like bluish that washed out like bluish gray look.
Kaminsky did the like whole bleach bypass thing for the film.
That I think War of the Worlds had the same kind of the same look. And there's been some, and like also I think Ready Player One kind of had that vibe too a little bit. But other than that, I've never really thought of his movies as like being like, super colorful. I feel like he always likes to keep it pretty natural looking for the most part, or just let the film stock speak for itself. But this is a movie where I feel like you can definitely tell there was some work put into the grade, where it's got these really kind of nice like yellowish tones. There's some really nice blues,
Well, so
it feels great.
It's funny because Kaminsky specifically talks about this in the behind the scenes stuff, and he says they played around with the film. They did a lot of different tests on like he had all these ideas of like things he could do with the film to make it like grainier or whatever. And at the end of the day, he decided to just be really restrained with it. So they actually didn't do any specific color changes. They didn't do any like negative manipulation for things like grain or what. They didn't manipulate the negatives for the film. And so it really comes down to, I think, the way he chose to light it, which is to really, really lean into the natural lighting that you would have had in the period. Great. Yeah. And, you know, it's...
I think about all the indoor scenes with like the really nice lamps and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like whenever, you know, he talks about when they're in a room, I did my best to light everything with whatever the natural lighting in that room would be. And so obviously, like, you know, if you've ever been on a movie set before, like you can have like a lamp, but then you have like an off-camera source that's maybe like giving some extra work for the lamp. You know, the lamp isn't doing all the work. There's stuff you're not seeing, but he's trying to like mimic the natural lighting from that lamp with the off-camera stuff. And so, you know, windows, when there's a window, he's got lighting coming in the window. You know, and so he really like, you know, and he said there's some times where you have to cheat, where you have to give some skylights where there wouldn't be any skylights, or, and then there's other times you cheat because it adds to the thematic resonance of what you're trying to portray. Like he talked specifically about when Lincoln and Grant are sitting on the porch, and the actual like lighting in that scene wouldn't actually be casting shadows of the soldiers passing by on them. It really wouldn't make sense for like the time of day or anything for those shadows to be there. But he was like, screw it. Like it adds to like the weight of seeing the shadows of these soldiers on horses pass over these guys as they talk about their fate. So like, yeah.
Well, that scene was really interesting because, like, I do understand the point because it kind of matches the theme of what they're talking about. I will say this. Look, not to say that I could direct this movie better than Spielberg, but I think that particular scene, I may have toned down the soldiers a little bit, because I do think that is one of the few things about the movie that really stuck out to me. I was like, it's just a constant stream of like soldiers like going across their faces, which, if that was the point, is to kind of be a thematic representation of what they're talking about. I totally understand that. It doesn't necessarily come off that way, but I think, you know, maybe they could have toned it down a little bit, because it almost like gets to a point where you're thinking, it almost looks like they're passing something in front of the light that's like human, like a little cutouts, you know, to look like people. Not actual extras. And it's just constant, that whole scene. And so it did kind of get a little distracting for me personally, but that's just one of those things that, like, I feel like I'm kind of the type of person that picks up on that, but I know most people won't notice.
I mean, I noticed it, but it didn't like distract me really. I was pretty like tuned in to like trying to listen to what they were saying. But
I think what it was is when you get the cross shots.
Yeah.
Because I guess the road is here, and then they have like the side roads. Yeah. You don't see anybody like passing on the edges of those cross shots. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's just one of those things, like having worked on film sets and just knowing how something like this would probably have been set up. I just couldn't help but start thinking about like how they would have shot it, and I'm just like, why are you passing? Why are so many people passing in front of the light? You know, but one of the like typical Kaminsky things that sometimes is distracting to me but works in this movie is like the smokiness. He has this like fantastical smokiness that he'll like that he'll add in to like scenes where I'm like, this, I don't know, smoking. I don't know why there's so much like smoky fog in this scene. There's a lot of that in like
So this wasn't Kaminsky, but in the color purple, there's a lot of that like fantastical. So maybe it's like partly Spielberg at fault, but Kaminsky is a big user of it too. But in this, it like totally makes sense because those rooms are like they probably are pretty
Everybody's
smoky.
smoking.
So
Yeah,
and
that's
everybody's smoking all the time, and so you know, yeah, you know, it makes sense. It feels right, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a world where people are constantly like riding horses and carriages down dusty roads, like yeah, I guess everything would kind of be a little dusty all the time in the air. So it's like one of the times where like, okay, Kaminsky's been doing this for all the movies, but now it finally like hits like, yeah, this is where it's supposed to be this way. It's I like Kaminsky. I think he does good work. You know, sometimes his choices can be distracting to me. Minority Report is one of those where like the lighting is, some people love it, but it's to me one of the parts of I love that movie, but that's one part that I don't love is all like the bleached out, washed out backlighting in it.
It is kind of an ugly movie at times, but I do really like that movie.
But yeah, in this, I think Kaminsky really, really, like you said, nails the lighting and the, yeah, I mean, I guess
vibe.
He said they didn't really do any color grading, so it really just must be, he nailed it with the lighting, lamps. I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Him and the production designer, the set designer really just cooked. You know?
They did, man. It's incredible. Yeah, we talked a little bit about the sound and the score just being subtle. It's there when it needs to be, and it's not when it's not. John Williams said his first inclination was like to do like period music that Lincoln would have heard, and then finally was like, no, I need to write. You know, it doesn't really it won't really like play correctly for what this movie needs. I need to write my own stuff. It was probably a wise choice. And they did they used the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, which apparently they had wanted to use for years. And the fun facts related to that is that Illinois was the first state to ratify the 13th Amendment. So, yeah,
there you go.
Cool. I think the one thing that stands out sound-wise, which we haven't talked about, is the ticking. Every once in a while, you get like the ticking of a watch or a clock, kind of in the background. Did you notice that? Really? I noticed it big time.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't watching with headphones on. If I was watching,
I was.
My headphones or AirPods on, I probably would notice it more. But coming through my speakers that I used, I didn't hear it.
Interesting. Okay, so there's so you know, we kind of mentioned there's only one battle scene, and it's like not very long. It's the very beginning, and Ben Burt, when he originally called, was like, oh, okay, Civil War, he needs me to like work on all these battle, and then he like read the script and he's like, oh, there's not any of that. But the fun facts with like the ticking stuff, so Gary Rydstrom, who worked on the movie, really wanted to like add in some like ticking. You know, these men all had like, you know, they had real working clocks in their offices, and they had real like ticking stopwatches with them, and he wanted to try to find a Lincoln watch. And so there were some in the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian was like, I don't think we want to risk it letting you use those. But he tracked down, apparently there was this watch that was given to Robert Lincoln after Abe was assassinated. And he had given it to a friend and whatever. Eventually it finds its way to the Kentucky Historical Society. And so they called them up, and they were like, you know, we don't even know if it works. And so they got it out and wound it, and sure enough, it works. So they were like, yeah, y'all can come record it. So they went and recorded the sound of his watch. And there's a couple of occasions where it's usually where Lincoln's waiting on something to happen, where you can hear like the most obvious place it is when he's sitting there at his desk like tapping his watch. You can hear like the ticking of it, But there's a couple other occasions. And then there's also the other most prominent ticking sound thing is the clock from his office when he's waiting on the 13th Amendment voting. And that clock that was in his office is actually still in the White House today. And so the White House actually let them go in and record that clock. So that's the actual like clock from his office that you hear there. And then I guess the other thing attached to that is the bells that ring out, you know, when the amendment is ratified, is passed, are at St. John's there in DC. And those would have been the actual bells that Lincoln would have heard in that moment. So a lot of like really cool, like little small sound details that I thought would be fun to share. But yeah, other than that, there's not really a whole lot to talk about with sound and score. It's just, it's there when it needs to be, and it's not when it's not.
Yeah, I think the only piece of music I really noticed is, I think during the voting scene.
Yeah.
I
Kind
think
of the typical Williams swelling.
It was when Thaddeus Stevens first walks into the chamber. It's like empty. There's like music playing.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to go back because I think there's a lot of really interesting similarities, I think, between a movie like this and Spielberg's film Amistad. And so I really kind of want to. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, so I really kind of want to go back and watch that and like maybe compare some of the musical cues, but also just as well as like the way it's filmed and things like that as well. I think it'd be really interesting.
It would definitely be interesting. I think this movie is like the antithesis of that movie in a lot of ways, especially like the story being told. I think that that movie displays a lot of naivete about how to handle slavery in a movie. It's one of the only movies that I watched and I was like, Spielberg should not have directed this movie. It just wasn't it was something that he should have used his power to get someone more like that would have had more to say about that story than he did.
That's interesting. I think I've heard you say that in the past. I don't know when we
I went on it was a solo episode, and I went on a bit of a tirade about that. A mild one, but
yeah, I haven't seen it in years, so I'd be interested to go back and revisit it.
It's not necessarily like a bad movie, but like just considering like where Spielberg was in his career, like you own your own production company. There's all that like. When you made The Color Purple, it was kind of like this thing where like the studios never would have like, or production companies never would have given it to a black director to direct like the budget that they would have needed. And you know, people like Spike Lee said as much about that movie. And so, but by the time Amistad comes around, like you literally run your own production company. And you could have given it to someone. And that was that's like my big thing with that is like, I'm not buying that, Spielberg had to make this one or it wouldn't have gotten made anymore because dude, you're literally, you're literally on your own studio. Yeah. So I don't know. I have strong feelings about Amistad and the movie it could have been. And the movie it turned out to be is, I don't know, very different than how this. I think it is actually like if Spielberg's the one making this movie, I think it's wise that like he stick to the story that he stuck with, and you know, yeah, we could have used a little bit more like look into like some black representation and what they were up to. But honestly, like after thinking hard about Amistad, I'm like, I don't know that Spielberg is the best person to do that. So, you know, it's probably for the best. But yeah. Yeah. So this movie, they finished filming in December of 2011. Spielberg said that at the end of it all, Daniel Day-Lewis called him into his trailer and just started talking to him, for the first time in a long time as Daniel Day-Lewis. And Spielberg said he actually like teared up and cried a little bit, because it was like, whenever these big films like this end, it's pretty emotional, for everyone that's been investing so much of their time and energy into these characters and these sets and whatnot. And so, and I mean, they literally I think they finished filming on Lincoln's death. And so, yeah, pretty emotional.
Very heavy stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny because they finished filming it December 19th, and then on the 21st, Adventures of Tintin releases, and then on the 25th, War Horse released. So, Spielberg didn't really get a whole lot of rest right after this, but
just like 93.
Yeah, probably.
We have Jurassic Park and Schindler's List both come out.
At least those were split up in the year. It was, yeah. I don't think the wisest choice to release Tintin and War Horse within 4 days.
Especially when you have how his movies are playing off of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the U.S. release of this movie is almost a year later on November 9th, 2012. It opened limited in 11 theaters the first weekend. And Spielberg actually purposely has talked about he purposely held it because 2012, big election year. And he purposely held it until after the election. So it wouldn't be campaign fodder for either side. And yeah, it probably would have had a very different resonance if, the election had gone the other way. But, yeah, it definitely played well at the time of its release. It opened at number 15 on that limited weekend. The number 1 was Skyfall that weekend. Yeah, $88
no
million
offense to Spielberg and Lincoln, but really bad movie to try and open up against.
Skyfall is, I think,
so good.
I don't know. Maybe some people that are more loyal to the classics would differ, but I think it's the best Bond movie.
As a man who is a massive fan of the franchise, I've seen every single Bond film. That is the correct opinion,
okay, there you go.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next weekend, Lincoln opened wide, and it opened at number 3 in the box office made $21 million opening weekend. The number 1 that weekend was the last Twilight movie, and it made $141 million on its opening weekend. How crazy is that? That's wild. Yeah. But yeah,
those
this
Twilight
movie,
freaks, man. What do I say?
They're crazy. This movie made $182 million domestic, $275 worldwide. So it did pretty good. I want to say it probably had around a $40-ish million budget. Maybe less. I don't remember.
Makes sense. I mean, it's really a pretty tame film as far as period pieces go.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see that being possible.
Yeah, and so it gets 12 nominations, Oscar noms, wins 2, and I'm vamping while I pull them up. So you get nominations for sound mixing, for the score, John Williams score, for costume design, film editing, cinematography, adapted screenplay, directing. Sally Field got a nod for actress in supporting role, which she lost to Anne Hathaway, I think, in Les Mis that year, which I don't know. I think Sally Field, I don't know. I guess it's like she won 2 already. We'll go with someone else.
Honestly, that is exactly how it works sometimes, believe it or not.
No, I mean, if Sally Field didn't already have 2 Oscars, they probably would have given that to her. But yeah, Tommy Lee Jones for supporting role, actor in a supporting role, and Best Picture, got the Best Picture nomination. It won 2. It won for production.
No Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis?
Well, just wait, because it won 2.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It won for production design, and it won for actor in a leading role for Daniel Day-Lewis. Yep. I think it's his 3rd actually acting Oscar, and it's the first ever acting Oscar for a Spielberg movie.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Spielberg movie had never gotten. It's gotten nominations, but this is the first Oscar win an acting role has ever gotten for a Spielberg movie. So that's pretty cool, and makes total sense.
Well, yeah, I get it's one of those things where it's like, I guess when it comes to Spielberg films, like it's just the idea of like there's these great adventures, these great blockbusters, but like I can't think of a single Spielberg movie where I'm like, wow, that was like a mind-blowing performance. I mean, like there's plenty of great characters, like Indiana Jones and all these other things, but like not like a cat, like, you know, maybe other than like Schindler's List, you know, for examples. I mean, there's a few in there, but it's there's not many Spielberg films I can think of that have these like grandiose monologues where they're obviously like, he is an Oscar bait, right?
Yep.
But and I don't mean that like as in any disrespect. Like, I love Spielberg films. I mean, he is one of the greatest to ever do it because he knows how to tell a good story in an exciting way.
Yeah.
And I mean, he invented the blockbuster. He did, you know, and so, yeah.
Yep. Him and George Lucas. They, and I think it's interesting because I think, Lucas, you know, isn't obviously making a lot of movies. He's doing like the prequels and stuff. Not at this point, but you know, earlier in the 2000s, and but I think really at this point, it feels like Spielberg is like pushing back against the machine that him and Lucas created. He's like, because, well, you think about like, there was a lot of skepticism around this movie when it was released. Like, how well is this going to do? Because how many people are going to flock to the theaters to see like a historical drama? And they were just wrong. The skeptics. I think we saw that again with Oppenheimer. Like, how many people are going to go see this 3-hour long biopic?
Yeah,
it's like,
but
everybody, you know.
Well, it's kind of both. There's 2 sides to that too, where it's like, I don't think anyone else other than Spielberg could have made a movie like this. Just like,
yeah.
Chris, like, you, like, unless you're Christopher Nolan, you're not getting, you know, $100 million to make a 3-hour biopic about a nuclear physicist,
right?
You know, but because, you know, Spielberg, up to this point, and now people like Nolan, like Denis Villeneuve, like I would even say like a Matt Reeves or an Edgar Wright. Yeah, like there's these names that
Scorsese,
you know, or Scorsese. Like, some of these names are household names. Some of them are more like you have to be kind of a cinephile. But like,
right,
there are these directors that their name alone, like, you know, all those guys I just named, like, if there's an announcement that they're working on something, I'm already interested.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, or Wes Anderson's another good example. So,
yeah. And Daniel Day-Lewis is the actor version of that. So
exactly. Yeah, he's definitely one of them for sure.
Yeah.
Or like a Christian Bale, you know, same kind of thing. Christian Bale's got something coming up. I'm already in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's funny, you know, you mentioned like we're talking about Oppenheimer, and you know, who else can get that huge budget to make the nuclear physicist, you know, movie. And I think this is like almost not the opposite, but like the other side of the coin, maybe, to that idea, because like, who else are they? Lincoln is obviously like a much more huge figure than Oppenheimer, not necessarily like both very important in their own ways, but just like everyone knows who Abraham Lincoln is. And it's kind of like, who else could we have given this movie of such great importance to other than Spielberg? It's kind of like the other side of that coin in a way.
Yeah. The only other person I can think of that could have done something with this is like a Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like
would have
really
been a different movie, but yeah,
for sure, probably a lot more F words for sure.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I will say this movie is PG-13 and it got away with 2 of them, so which was
did it really?
I think one of them is like not fully pronounced, so that's probably why.
Yeah.
Even though I watched it with the subtitles on it was in the subtitles, but there is technically 2 of them. So
yeah,
both from James Spader, which was very funny.
Makes sense though.
yeah.
I love.
But but even thinking of like a Christopher Nolan doing a movie like this, I'm like, dude, that would.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not. It would be structured different.
Yeah. It's like Lincoln from the future visiting with Lincoln from the past or something.
He definitely wouldn't do it straightforward, that's for sure. But I mean, it worked out well for Oppenheimer. So, I did write down this one quote from this French publication, Cahiers du Cinéma. They said, quote, "Never before in historical films has Steven Spielberg achieved a height of vision comparable to that which makes Lincoln a major work," unquote. So even over in France, they're like, yeah, this is a great movie about an American hero,
You know what I just realized?
What's that?
Do you know what other movie came out this same year?
What?
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Is it the same year?
It's the same year. I was thinking about it, and I was like, wait, didn't Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter also come out in 2012? And sure enough, it did.
That's funny. It
did. I
knew that movie existed, and
it came out in June 22nd, so a couple months before this. But it is interesting that we had 2 Abraham Lincoln movies that came out the same year.
Oh man. Yeah. It's Spielberg, I don't think Spielberg would have made Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but
I would have loved to see it though.
Yeah. I would have watched it for sure. He did after this. The next thing he had started on was an American Sniper adaptation, Chris Kyle's autobiography. He withdrew in 2013. He didn't really feel like he could make the movie he wanted with like the budget and whatnot, and so. But Eastwood is the one that took that over. That movie did pretty well in 2014 released.
Won some Oscars, I think, right?
Yeah. Another fun fact around this time in his career, I mean a little later, but kind of attached to like the presidential stuff, is that Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015. So, yeah, pretty cool.
Hi. Quick reminder that you can be a huge help to the production of this show. If you visit establishingshotpod.com/donate, you'll find out how to join the Establishing Shot family through some giving tiers starting as low as $5 a month. You heard that right, only $5 a month. And not only will you be helping me keep the show going, but you'll also get some perks yourself, like early and ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, access to a Discord server where we can chat it up about the show and movies in general, and more. Might even let you choose a movie for me to review for the show. Check out that link in the show notes to learn more. Back to the show.
Yeah, let's just kind of talk through just other stuff about the movie. Did you have like any quibbles with it? Like when you came out of it, were there any part, like we've touched on a few little things, but like were there any big like plot points or anything like that you kind of felt like, this didn't really work for me in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, other than that opening kind of scene we already talked about with
Yeah.
the different soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Lee Jones, and then the shadows of the soldiers walking past him and Grant. I mean, I think the only other thing is, I think it's on your outline. You kind of wanted to talk about this. Is the Abraham Robert Lincoln thing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's like it's kind of hard. Like, I have to remind myself that like it was a different time period, so there was like a lot of different cultural expectations about relationships between fathers and sons. But it's
Sure.
just, I don't know. It's like all that kind of stuff. It's like, I guess sometimes I'm more interested to learn like how, I'm assuming that was kind of historically accurate, how they kind of have this
Yeah.
cold relationship. But it's just one of those things that when Robert kind of just pops up in the movie and they have this kind of standoffish relationship, it, because of the way this movie is structured, it's like, does it really feel earned?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there has to, like, you need some kind of, as an audience, I feel like we need some kind of introduction to why they are that way.
Yeah.
And they kind of try and give us that a little bit later with something that Mary Todd Lincoln says, but I didn't think it really worked.
Yeah, there's some background stuff going on that, like, if you don't know the history, then, like, you don't really get the background you need. So one of the things that, like, they don't really, like, so it's one of those things where, like, I appreciate that they don't try to over-explain things, but there is a bit of, like, it could have used a little bit more of that. But, so there was a point, earlier in their life where Robert and William, I don't know, I can't remember. I think they called him Willie, but maybe, I don't know if he was William or what. They were both sick with typhoid, I think. And Willie died. Robert ended up surviving. And so it might even be something like that, something like of the keeping yourself distant from the son, not wanting to get too close. But it's kind of like that weird grief thing of, like, we had both of these sons sick at the same time. We lost one, the other survived. This kind of, like, subconscious, like, resentment, maybe even that, like, you would never know how to express that, but it's, like, somewhere in there. But that's
he does
not
kind of tell Mary
in the movie.
Yeah, well, he does kind of tell Mary that, like, he wanted to grieve their son more, but he couldn't let himself do it because
great scene.
He has an entire country to worry about, where hundreds of thousands of sons have died.
Yeah,
and so he kind of has to have persona that he has to give to the public, and so I do think there could be some of that where he feels guilty for not being able to be a better father for them when they're sick, and so that kind of causes some of that tension between him and Robert.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't, like, hate the Robert Lincoln stuff. It just kind of feels like it's a bit shoehorned in. And
I think they could have cut out some of that stuff for sure. And it would have been the same movie.
Yeah.
Other than the scene where they go to the military hospital, that's, like, the only one where it's like you kind of need him to be there, I guess.
Yeah, and it's fine. It's like that to me is not like a huge problem. It's just like a small quibble, and I don't know. It doesn't really affect my opinion on the movie a whole lot. The other, like, thing that I thought would be interesting to hit on is, like, the ending. Like, are there too many endings to this movie? This is sometimes a problem with Spielberg movies. Like, he has, like, one or two too many endings. But yeah, so I do think, like, having the respect and whatnot to not show the assassination, I think that's a good choice. Like, we know what happens. We don't need to see it. Like, It's, you know, it's just not necessary. And so I liked that choice, but like, I don't know. So you have like the whole like him being like, oh, I'm gonna be late and walking out, and you know, Henderson, like Stephen McKinley Henderson, looking at him and thinking, you know, you can tell on his face like, oh, this man's about to die, sort of thing. The silhouette as he walks away. So you have that. That's one ending. I think that really is like one ending, the first ending. But then you cut to the theater, and it's, you know, it's kind of like a trick. Like it's the son at the Arabian Nights play where they, you know, the guy runs out and is like, Lincoln is dead or whatever. And
which they had a scene a little bit earlier where he and Mary were at a theater.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, are they about to... It's a little too early for him to get the old shot to the head, but okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's funny. I think I, for half a second, thought the same thing, but then was like, well, they went to stuff all the time, you know. So, you know, there's that, and, you know, that could be an ending. You have Lincoln in his deathbed being pronounced dead, and, you know, him saying, you know, he, you know, I can't remember the exact quote, but, you know, talking about him being a figure for the ages or whatever. That's another ending, but then it like does the crossfade with the flickering light and him giving it's like a flashback to his second inaugural address. And that's the actual ending, which is like, to me, the fourth potential ending of the movie, you know? And I'm, you know, it's just one of those things where it kind of drags. I did like in the special features, Rick Carter shared why he liked the cutting to the son, and I thought it was an interesting take. He said, like, when you cut from him leaving the house, he said in your mind you imagine like three potential things you're going to cut to. One would be like seeing Our American Cousin play like on the stage that Lincoln and Mary are watching. The other would be just seeing them in the booth. And the third thing you might imagine is cutting to like John Wilkes Booth, heading to the booth or whatever. But instead you cut to the son watching this Arabian Nights play, and, you know, he kind of says like our expectation is like stolen from us in an unexpected way. And kind of is in a sense like relating that to how Lincoln's death felt. It's like this unexpected, you know, this stolen from us sort of thing. I thought that was an interesting take. But I still feel like, I don't know, I don't know if the ending to me did feel like it drags a bit. I'm not sure that we needed to hear Lincoln's death pronounced. I'm not sure that we needed to like crossfade into his second inaugural address. I guess that part is the one that like least bothers me, because it's like, it's a Lincoln movie, you know. I guess it makes sense to like cut to one of his great speeches at the end of the movie. But yeah, I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think kind of just like fading it out as he's kind of walking, and we kind of get that silhouette, either that or cut from that to maybe like a voiceover of his speech and some you know, kind of ending title cards pop up, but or maybe just like a classic
maybe some like 1980s historical pictures.
Or like a classic like 1980s freeze frame where he suddenly jumps up and does like a fist bump and, you know, cuts. I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be funny, but no, I guess I definitely do agree that I think that would have been the best part to end it, and then because I think cutting to the play, but it's not the play, it's just this other play that his son is at, and then the guy comes out, the president's been shot. Like,
and you get like the overacting kid. Yeah.
I mean, you know, no offense to the kid, he's a kid. Yeah, I mean, you know, he's doing the best.
It probably is what a kid might have done, but
yeah, it's just hugging the bits. Yeah, it did feel a little silly, but
Yeah, poor Tad.
but yeah, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
man. All right.
You know, it didn't bother me a ton. I still think it's a great movie. Yeah, Spielberg distinctives, mirrors are back. It's been a while since we've had some good mirror shots in a Spielberg movie, but like the main one is like Mary Todd Lincoln looking in the mirror, Lincoln in the background on the bed. Great shots in that way. Silhouettes, lots of silhouettes. I already said the most silhouette worthy figure in history, maybe. Efficient character building. I talked about that. We talked about like little moments of comic relief that aren't like the focus of the movie, but are like thrown in and work really well.
Mostly through James Spader's.
Mostly James Spader, yeah. But also like, some of Lincoln's quips are pretty like chuckle worthy, and then fun transitions. Like the one I wrote down was going from Spader cracking open the crab with the hammer to the gavel in the House of Representatives. Like, what a fun transition, Yeah, let's dig into any like takeaways from this. When you walked away from the film, I don't remember if you've mentioned this since we started recording, but like you just watched this earlier today, like, so you're pretty fresh out of it.
Yeah, I kind of had to split it half and half into 2 days. So I did finish it today. So yeah.
Yeah. So what were, when you kind of finished the movie, what were some of the things maybe like thematically, or like maybe like relating to where we are today that were maybe rolling around in your head?
Yeah, I think, man, I really just think I did really love the way that it kind of demythologized Lincoln in a lot of ways, because kind of like David Day-Lewis said, I feel like Lincoln is a figure that is so ubiquitous with politics, and you hear so many takes on his presidency and the things that he did from people that agree with him, people that don't agree with him. Like his critics say, oh, well, he only emancipated the slaves because it was a war measure. And then this movie, being really based on historical accuracy from this book, is kind of painting a picture more of, he actually was something that really bothered him on a personal level. There's a lot of other things to that. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, my biggest takeaways were just the demythologizing of Lincoln. But also, man, it really makes me wish that we still lived in the days where politicians had viewpoints they actually stood by, agree with them or don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, it gets a little exhausting, when you look at and I'm sure they had a problem with this at the time as well, but just, it feels like, you elect someone who claims, I'm going to go to Washington and represent you. Yeah. And then they literally don't ever make a decision that you actually support, Yeah. But these are men that had backbones, that had, like, again, agree with them, disagree with them, love them or hate them.
Yeah.
They had an opinion and a viewpoint, and they were willing to stand on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it, like, one of the things I was just thinking about is like the like complex inner workings of democracy, and how there's like all these gears to this machine, and yeah, like really, like a lot of the times, one of the things it doesn't like shy away from is like sometimes the gears are a little dirty. Like you have to do a little bit of lying, you have to do a little bit of paying people off. It's it doesn't portray like Lincoln as this like, angel with, angel wings and a halo that did everything perfectly. Like, no, like he had a goal, and he did some things. He made some tough decisions and made some, had some like things he had to like get his hands a little dirty with to get this thing done. And it's, I mean, like if you think about, so like you talked about, people are like, oh, Lincoln only did this for this. Well, like the real like thrust of that is the 13th Amendment. Like he did not have to like put all that he did into that. When you just look at it, he's putting like literally like all the weight of his political power, which he kind of talks about in that one monologue, behind this thing. And then he kind of like slyly cheats his way into delaying the war. Like he didn't have to delay the war. And that's a real serious thing. It's not like just, I don't know, it's not delaying something of, not much consequence to get this thing passed. It's delaying like the reunification of the country and the ending of a war that's killing hundreds of thousands of men's lives in order to like push this thing through and get it done. And that doesn't happen from someone that like doesn't actually care. Yeah. That just doesn't make sense. I'm not buying that, whatever they're selling with that theory.
Yeah. I mean, as he says, like, the Emancipation Proclamation only covers these rebel agitators.
Yeah.
Right? So the moment that the Union is reunified and they're no longer rebel agitators, that doesn't apply. So that way, that means we have to approach it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as Grant says a little bit later, almost towards the end of the film, he's like, you look 10 years older than you did last year.
Yeah. Which we see with a lot of presidents, to be honest. But I mean, so one of the other things I was thinking about too was like, one thing this movie shows that like we're doing a lot of questioning of today is just, okay, where are the lines to political powers? What lines should and shouldn't be crossed? And Lincoln talks about that. He in the movie, he talks about like, I don't know where my powers necessarily end. And so I'm doing things that like haven't been explicitly said I can't do just to see if it'll work, and pushing those bounds. And it's one of those things where like, yeah, like he's really like doing some testing of the bounds of the Constitution on what he can and can't do. And like there's a lot of discussion about that today. What are the bounds of the Constitution that our current president should or shouldn't be pushing? Avoiding saying names so that they don't end up in my transcript. It's published online, but what are the bounds of our current sitting president? What should be binding what he's doing and what shouldn't? Is he just kind of playing this same sort of game that Lincoln played of like just doing things to test and see if it'll stick? And I think that's like somewhat fair, but I think the big difference is like there's pushing of bounds with a moral foundation. And I'm not sure what the moral foundation is. I think the moral foundation of what Lincoln was doing at this time is pretty obvious and pretty apparent and blatant. Whereas like the decisions being made by the current sitting president and his party and his backers, like it's just hard to see like, okay, what's the moral foundation here? What are we doing? Because it seems like there's a lot of just like throwing things at the wall from all kinds of different moral angles and seeing what sticks, and hoping that you're loyal supporters where just go with whatever you do. Yeah, I just don't know. Like, I think too, there's also like Lincoln wasn't doing things that like are in blatant disregard to the Constitution. He's like pushing into gray lines. And I think there's a lot of stuff by our current administration that like is blatantly disregarding things like habeas corpus and whatnot. And so I don't know. I think there's I think someone that is a supporter of our current administration could watch a movie like this, hear some of the things Lincoln says, and like, oh, that's what our president right now is doing. He's just like pushing. And I just think that's like, a very different, it's a very different thing going on. And, you know, Lincoln is just very easy to appropriate for whatever thing you want him to like get behind. And I just want to put it out there. Like, I don't think that the balance Lincoln is pushing, testing what he can and can't do, really is that similar because of the reasons I've stated to our current administration's actions. But
I think like you said, the context matters,
right?
You know,
right.
I think the other biggest takeaway too is that just like the title of the book, Team of Rivals, is that, you know, Lincoln was a man who was comfortable being surrounded by and working alongside people who vehemently disagreed with him.
Yeah.
And wanted him to take a very different approach. But ultimately, through his wisdom and leadership, chose to side with him. You know, even if they had to bite their tongue sometimes, or if they had to suck it up, or whatever. As opposed to, you know, the current administration, who we see time and time again that when dissension occurs, you're ousted, and that's just not healthy for anyone in any kind of position of authority. To be surrounded by yes men, it creates a lot of problems, and so
I think that's the big thing.
But I don't even think that's just a problem with the president. I think it's a problem with a lot of politicians in general.
Absolutely. Echo chambers
and exactly, and then it feeds over into the extremes of both ends of the political spectrum can be the same way, where it's like, you know, if you know, there's a big thing nowadays where it's like, oh, I got to protect my peace, you know, so one little argument with a friend about something, and all of a sudden it's like, can't be friends anymore, you know, and I just think, like, you know, the founding fathers up through like the politicians of this era would have looked at that and been like, that's kind of crazy, actually. You know.
No, I mean, absolutely. And I don't know, it can be disheartening to watch a movie like this about this man that like had such strong convictions and stood by those convictions to the detriment of eventually his life, really. And I don't know, it's I know in the next episode, me and my guest Elijah Davidson kind of talk about this, you know, the relationship of this movie with Bridge of Spies, and focusing on like, you know, putting kind of like this ideal in front of you, and saying like, okay, this is what we should strive for. Maybe this person that I'm putting on display isn't like super realistic, like, but it's an ideal, and I'm going to present you with this ideal that you should aim for and strive for. It's kind of like, you know, we even talked about it on there, like, just from our religious background, kind of like what the Christian life is supposed to be. You're supposed to like put Jesus as the image of the ideal in front of you and like aim for that. Like, probably not gonna get there anytime soon, but I think that's kind of like what Spielberg's doing in this small string of movies, is kind of taking a look at like the political and like place culture was, and just saying, okay, what are some ideals that I think we need to like see done how they're supposed to be done on the big screen. And yeah, I don't know. I think this movie does a great job of it. While also like just, I don't know, while also keeping Lincoln as like you said, kind of demythologizing him at the same time, bringing him down to a place where he does feel a little bit more reachable. If that makes sense. Like, okay, Lincoln, you know, he did get his hands dirty. He did like have, you know, some problems at home, you know, he wasn't this superhero, but he was an actual man, and he just had strong convictions and stuck to them and did what he had to do to like make those convictions come into reality. So I don't know. I really like that aspect of this movie. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess like before we wrap up, final thoughts, were there any other like images or sequences or quotes or anything you wanted to point out?
Not that I can really think of, man. I think it's
Lincoln banging the table. No. How was my impression? Was that pretty good?
It was pretty good.
Thanks.
Maybe a little higher pitched, but no. I mean, I think I just think the movie was super solid. You know, yeah. I don't know. That's kind of that's all I got.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think it's a great movie. I think it's not going to end up like in my upper echelon of Spielberg. I know I mentioned earlier, I talked a little bit about this with Elijah next week. Not next week, but 2 weeks out on Bridge of Spies episode. But he has Lincoln like way up there in his Spielberg movies. This is just like a solid 4-star like Spielberg movie for me.
Yeah.
And you know, one in which Tommy Lee Jones calls a man more lizard than man, so
yeah,
gotta love that.
What's not to like?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have any more thoughts, I mean, this just a great movie about a great man in history. So
I agree.
I don't know what else to say. Be more like Lincoln, I guess. Like, or maybe like expect more Lincoln from your representatives and your political backings, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really it. I know this episode is going to be, it just like happened to work. I didn't even plan this, but this is releasing on Independence Day on July 4th. So happy July 4th, happy Independence Day to everybody out there. And you know, hope you enjoyed the Lincoln talk for Independence Day.
Yeah, I hope you guys blew some things up on behalf of Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Blew up some fireworks.
Shoot, if you can find like a top hat shaped explosion, you know, firework, that would be great.
There you go.
You know, send me some videos of that if you find that. I would love to see it. But yeah, that's really all we have for this week. JP, you want to share where people can find you if they want to see more of what you're doing?
Give me a follow on Instagram. My full name, Jean-Pierre Boudreaux, on Instagram. I'm always over there.
I'll link it for sure.
Update what's going on.
Yeah, and I'll link your Letterboxd. Always enjoy the reviews. Yep.
I love Letterboxd. Like, you know, I think when I first started using it more, I tried to like embrace like doing like serious reviews.
Yeah.
But now, like 90% of the people on their review is just a joke. So I just try to do that too. Like a couple.
I have a little bit of both. For sure. But yeah, fun movie draft coming up next week. We're gonna do movie presidents, so be fun. Look forward to it, and then pick back up with Bridge of Spies the week after that. So be looking for that. But yeah, that's all we have for this week. I have been Eli Price for J.P. Boudreaux. You've been listening to The Establishing Shot. We'll see you next time.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.